27th alone, there were 218 tornadoes that touched the ground here. Together in the span of just 4 days, these tornadoes caused over $11 billion in damages, claimed the lives of 324 people, and injured over 2,200 others. You can actually tell the path of tornadoes very easily from satellite images like this one, but even still, this wasn't even the most lethal tornado incident in the region. The deadliest tornado in U.S. history happened back in March 1925 in this region of Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana. There is no record of how fast the wind speed of the tornado may have been at the time, but it slashed through a path between all 3 states of 218 miles long. It traveled that distance in only 3.5 hours, meaning that if the tornado instead started in Washington, D.C., it would have reached all the way to New York City in the same amount of time. In that distance, the tornado claimed the lives of 695 people, but even then, it wasn't the deadliest tornado in world history. A lesser-known tornado hotspot is located on the other side of the world in this region of Bangladesh and eastern India. 4 lives have actually been claimed in this region by tornadoes and even a tornado alley, and the most catastrophic of these happened back in 1989. Most people in this region live in very impoverished conditions and poorly built structures, and that combined with the insane population density of the area is what led to this disaster. The tornado struck a heavily populated area of these poorly built structures and ended up claiming the lives of over 1,300 people and over 12,000 more. It was considered an EF5 tornado, which is the highest possible categorization for a tornado, meaning that it had wind speeds of well over 200 miles per hour, which is capable of moving cars, trucks, and even train cars and turning into missiles that can be fired from a mile away from the tornado itself. It's often not the wind that actually kills a person in a tornado, but the vast amount of debris that the tornado picks up from obliterating thousands of homes. When it splinters, trees, metal, cars, and even animals can all become a swirling vortex of death traveling at speeds of several hundred miles an hour. With all of this being said, however, the largest and probably most terrifying tornado known to have ever happened on our planet was the El Reno tornado, and it took place not too long ago in 2013, just west of Oklahoma City. Compared to the size of most tornadoes that I talked about at the beginning of this video, the El Reno behemoth reached a size of 2.6 miles wide and achieved a terrifying wind speed of 302 miles per hour, which is the fastest recorded wind ever taken on our planet. To put these numbers into perspective, you can actually fit 2 fully sovereign countries completely inside the width of the tornado, Vatican City and Monaco. Even more ludicrous is what it would look like if we put this tornado over New York City. The entire length of Central Park from end to end is almost a perfect measurement of how wide this tornado actually was. So imagine a tornado that long with winds screaming around it over 300 miles per hour. That's fast enough to severely damage even skyscrapers and can rip the asphalt straight off of streets to the ground. If you're curious what would happen to your face at those speeds, then here's a video taken from the NASA Langley Research Center back from 1946 showing exactly what would happen to you in such a tornado condition. If the El Reno tornado had happened literally just a few more miles to the east, it would have directly hit downtown Oklahoma City, and it probably would have destroyed the city. The scariest thing about tornadoes like this one is that they can happen in a huge variety of places with very little warning, and it's entirely possible that the next time a big one happens, it won't be in a countryside field, but rather in a large city. I'm going to leave you with this fascinating map from NOAA that shows you the daily probability of a tornado strike near your house throughout the year. Enjoy.
And 20 miles into the air.
I would highly recommend you checking out their video next, and if you enjoyed my video, then I found it.
Biggest volcanic eruption in recent history.
It was the largest empire that the world had ever seen up to that point, and in the year 720, the empire stretched all the way from the Atlantic Ocean in the west to India in the east. It was, without a doubt, the most powerful empire in the world, but gradually over the centuries receded into history. That then begs the question, what if this old empire was reunited today in the modern world with the exact same borders that it had in the year 720? Despite how utterly impossible this is, let's just assume that the Caliphate suddenly just appeared back into existence instantly with its exact borders. 36 different modern countries would lose all or some of their territory to the Caliphate, including places as far away from each other as Portugal and India. 11.1 million square kilometers of territory would belong to the empire, which would make it the second largest country in the world behind only Russia. It would be home to a population of 665,217,000 people, which would place it as the third most populous country in the world behind both India and China. Compared to the recreated Roman Empire that I did in another video, the Caliphate would have a similar but slightly smaller population. Something interesting that I discovered while doing the research for this video was that despite the empire being called the Arab Caliphate, Arabs themselves form a plurality within the country at 46% of the population. It's easy to see why, since the empire covers an extremely diverse amount of land, with Spaniards and Portuguese over here, Turks here, Kurds here, Persians here, and Pakistanis and Indians over here in the east. Arabic would be the official language spoken by a majority of the population, but Arabic itself is quite different from place to place. Arabic speakers in some parts of North Africa, for example, are completely incomprehensible to many Arabic speakers from Syria or Iraq for a variety of reasons. Perhaps every variety of the language would be considered as official, but overall, Arabic would remain the most well-understood language within the borders of the empire. Of course, from the title of this video and the area of the world we're talking about, you probably were safe to assume that Islam would be the dominant religion within this empire. Islam would be represented by 85% of the Caliphate's modern population, divided between 64% being Sunni and 21% being Shia. The Caliphate would also have a very large Christian minority represented by 9% of the population. Jews would make up 1% of the population. Hindus, Zoroastrians, and other faiths would make up the following 3%, and the final 2% would be made up of atheists or non-religious persons. Also, the largest city in the Caliphate, Karachi, would be located in Pakistan outside of the main Arab core. Karachi has almost as many people living in it than all of Afghanistan combined, for example. And the other biggest cities in the Caliphate would be Cairo, Tehran, Baghdad, and Riyadh. However, I would expect that Damascus would likely become the reunited empire's capital city, since it was the capital of the Caliphate back in the year 720 at the empire's territorial height. And now we need to move on to every empire's favorite subject, money. The reunited Arab Caliphate would have a nominal GDP of $5.34 trillion US, which would mean it would be the third largest economy in the world, overtaking both Germany and Japan, but remaining behind China and the United States. But that's actually a pretty high-valued economy compared to other empires that I've covered in the past, like the Soviet Union and the United African Continent, for example. However, the Caliphate's nominal GDP per capita would be down to just $8,027 a person, which means that the living conditions for the average citizen would be roughly the same as it is for the average citizen in China today. Of course, since the Caliphate would absorb entire countries like Saudi Arabia, Iran, Kuwait, and Qatar, it would instantly become by far the world's largest producer of oil. In fact, nearly 30% of all the Earth's oil production would be controlled by the Caliphate, which would give it an enormous leverage on the world stage. The other tool that the empire could use as leverage would be its massive military, which would become the largest in the world with 4,214,000 active-duty troops. That's more active-duty soldiers than China and the United States combined, and in addition, the Caliphate would find itself in possession of an additional 4,216,000 troops placed in reserves. If called upon, the Caliphate would have by far the largest military force in the world. The only two empires that I've covered before who would have larger militaries would be both the Mughal and British empires. With all things being considered, the reunited modern Arab Caliphate would almost certainly be a potential world superpower. Governing from its capital of Damascus, the Caliphate would be the second largest country in the world, have the third highest population in the world, have the third largest global economy, it would be in possession of the world's largest military, and also control 30% of the entire world's oil production, vastly more than any other individual country. It would probably be similar in world power projection to modern-day China, and would struggle with the vast ethnic diversity such a large empire would bring, its relatively low living conditions on average, and the large divide between Sunni and Shia Muslims within the country. Internal pressures and problems is what tore the historical Caliphate apart before finally anything else that I missed talking about in this video. If you liked what you just watched, then I hope you subscribe to my channel by clicking. This is a real-life lore video made possible by Squarespace. Make your next move with a beautiful website from Squarespace. This is Earth. You live here on this planet somewhere, and everything you've ever known is located right here. But just how small exactly is Earth when compared to the scale of the entire universe? Let's start by zooming out to where we can see our nearest positive neighbor, the Moon. You may think that the Moon is very close to Earth since it dominates our night skies, but in reality the Moon isn't this close to our planet. It's actually about this far away, 384,400 kilometers away from Earth right now on average. You could fit 30 entire Earths in between this distance, and if you somehow were able to drive a car at a constant 100 kilometers per hour speed, it would take you about 160 days to drive the entire distance. Despite this incredible distance, however, However, 12 humans have actually set foot here, representing the furthest away that any individual human has ever been away from the Earth, and one of humanity's greatest achievements. This is what the Earth would look like from here if you were standing there with them, and if you wanted to communicate with somebody back at home, it would take a message about 2.5 seconds to travel between you and them, since that's how fast the speed of light can travel at. This is a photo that was taken on Mars, and that tiny dot that you see there is Earth as seen from the Martian surface. On average, Mars is an incredible 225 million kilometers away from Earth, but that distance can be as high as 401 million kilometers. That means that whenever humanity finally gets around to landing a human on the planet, that person will be 986 times further away from Earth than the astronauts who landed on the Moon were. In addition, the time delay for sending a message from Mars back to Earth isn't just 2.5 seconds, it's actually more like 20 minutes each direction, which would render instant communication in the event of an emergency impossible. When we zoom out even further away, we can find the Voyager 1 space probe, which is the furthest away man-made object from Earth. It is currently located 138 AUs from the Earth, AU meaning astronomical unit, which is the distance between the Earth and the Sun, which means that Voyager 1 is 138 times further away from us than the Sun is. At some point on its long voyage, Voyager 1 turned its camera around and took this photograph. It may not look like much at first, but in my opinion, this is the greatest single photograph ever taken in all of human history. This tiny, pale blue dot is Earth, and I don't think that anybody has ever said something as amazing about this as Carl Sagan said. If you look at it, you see a dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you ever heard of, every human being ever lived out their lives. The aggregate of all our joys and sufferings. Thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines. Every hunter and every forager. Every hero and coward. Every creator and destroyer of civilizations. Every king and every peasant. Every young couple in love. Every hopeful child. Every mother and every father. Every inventor and explorer. Every teacher of morals. Every corrupt politician. Every superstar. Every supreme leader. Every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there, on a boat of dust suspended in a sunbeam. Voyager 1 is currently traveling at 17 kilometers every single second. Even at that speed, it won't break out of the reach of our solar system for another 30,000 years. Once we go beyond the solar system, we arrive in our interstellar neighborhood. Here we shift to the light year unit of measurement, which is the distance that light travels in a full Earth year, or about 9.461 trillion kilometers. The star Proxima Centauri here is the closest other star to us other than our sun, but it's still 4.24 light years away from us. To put that into perspective, if it was heading in the right direction, it would still take Voyager 1 over 70,000 years to reach it. In other words, if you drove your car at 100 kilometers an hour like in our over 6 times longer than the entire age of the universe is just to finally get there, and it wouldn't even exist still when you arrive. When we zoom out even further, we can see the entire Milky Way galaxy inside of the here. This dot is the furthest extent of humanity's radio broadcasts throughout history, which means that any possible aliens who live outside of this range are totally unaware of humanity's presence. It's complete silence outside of this yellow dot as far as we are currently aware, but the entire galaxy spans over 100,000 light years from end to end. There are over 100 billion stars and over 100 billion planets inside of our galaxy. When you have never seen the full glory of the galaxy at night, because 99% of the stars you can see with the naked eye are limited to a small, tiny region right here. But even this massive galaxy is nothing compared to the rest of what's out there. Zooming out even further, and we arrive at the local group of galaxies, a collection of 54 different galaxies that is about 10 billion light years across. But zooming out even further, you can see the Barrow supercluster, of which the local group here is just a tiny segment of. There are at least 100 other groups of galaxies just like our local group inside of here, and the distance from one side to the other is a mind-numbing 100 million light years. But even the massive Barrow supercluster is nothing but a giant and tiny globe of the Great Lanian supercluster, an enormous structure that is within our galaxy as well as 100,000 other galaxies. The distance from one side to the other is 520 million light years. But from even there, we can zoom out all the way to the entire observable universe and see that even the gigantic Laniakea supercluster is just a tiny and insignificant part of everything. This is the observable universe, and it contains everything that we know of. It is home to at least 2 trillion different and individual galaxies, which together contain more stars than there are grains of sand on the entire Earth. The distance from Earth to any side of the observable universe is 46.5 billion light years, which means that the entire width is 93 billion light years across. What's perhaps even more interesting, however, is what actually lies beyond the observable universe. Keep in mind that the observable universe is all that we can currently see, and it's entirely possible that the rest of the universe outside of it is vastly larger and more fantastic than we can possibly ever imagine. We simply don't know what else is out there because the light from these incredibly distant places has not yet had enough time in the universe's history to reach us yet back on Earth, and the light from some places may never reach us at all. Because some parts of space very far away from Earth are expanding away from us faster than the speed of light, that means that the light from these places will never, in an infinite amount of time, reach Earth. Meaning that even if humanity is eternal and exists forever, there will still be an unknown number of places in the universe that we will never know about or ever see. So, it is very likely that as unbelievably enormous as it seems, the observable universe is just a tiny slice of what we can currently see of the entire universe. According to the theory of cosmic inflation that was proposed by Dr. Alan Guth, if it is assumed that cosmic inflation began at 10 to the negative 37th of a second after the Big Bang, and with the assumption that the size of the universe before inflation began was equal to its age times the speed of light, then this would seem to suggest that at the present day, the entire universe is 156 trillion times larger than the observable universe. That number, for reference, looks like this, with this many zeros. Let this number sink in for just a moment. This would be similar to you thinking that the entire observable universe, everything that you could see, was the size of a light bulb, but then realizing that in reality the entire universe is larger than the former planet of Pluto. Imagine a light bulb in the center of Pluto, but we inside the light bulb were totally unaware that Pluto existed outside of it, and that's a similar situation to this. We are all so unbelievably small, but you shouldn't worry, because all that means is that there's so much left out there for us to discover together. This video was made possible by Squarespace. If you're wanting to create a new website for your next project, Squarespace is the easiest way of doing it. I've used them before for several different projects, need any help. You can create a blog, a store, a page for your music or art, or really just about anything. And what's best of all is that you can get 10% off your first order by using the code RealLifeLore over at squarespace.com/reallifelore. That also means that you'll be directly supporting my channel, so please go ahead and check them out at squarespace.com/reallifelore. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, I sincerely hope that you'll share it with a friend or two and give this video either a like or a dislike. You can subscribe to my channel for content exclusive by clicking here. You can visit my Patreon by clicking here if you're interested in supporting the channel. Watch some older videos of mine by clicking here over on the left, and I hope to see you again next time. Already looked at some pretty weird borders in previous episodes in this series, like panhandles that stretch out for hundreds of kilometers away from their parent country, or islands that change what country they belong to every 6 months. But there are still countless other strange borders that exist in the world, and in this episode we're going to talk about a few of those. To begin with something a little ridiculous, let's head over to Turkey, and by that I mean this rectangle located inside of Syria that's 26 kilometers south of the Turkish border. You see, this rectangle that is official Turkish territory surrounded by Syria is the tomb of a man named Suleiman Shah, who was the grandfather of a guy named Osman I, who was the founder of the Ottoman Empire. He was buried in Syria, and for various geopolitical reasons, his tomb has remained as sovereign Turkish territory despite it, well, being located inside of Syria. This has gotten particularly awkward lately, with the Syrian civil war raging all around the tomb site. And in 2015, the Turkish government actually launched a military operation into Syria to recover the remains of the long-dead Suleiman Shah and rescue the few dozen Turkish soldiers from the burial site. The Turks then moved the burial site just 180 meters south of the Turkish border so that they could put a better eye on it. But the Turkish government insists that this move is only temporary and that the original burial site is still fully sovereign Turkish territory. Next, we're going to shift over just a little bit to this weird-looking blob, which is part of the United Arab Emirates, home to a small village of about 40 buildings. The village, however, is completely surrounded by territory that belongs to Oman, and this Omani territory is about 3,000 people. But even stranger, this Omani territory is further completely surrounded by the rest of the United Arab Emirates. A bit further to the north, we can also see another excellent Oman called the Sudan Peninsula. This strange situation means that Emirati citizens living in this territory called Barrow have to cross through 2 different border checkpoints just to enter their own country. Once they leave the UAE into Oman, and then once again when they leave Oman back into the UAE, and vice versa. On the flip side, it's possible for somebody in mainland Oman who travels to the other side of the border, the Sudan Peninsula, to go from being in Oman to being in the UAE, to being back in Oman, to being back in the UAE, to being back in Oman again, to then be back in the UAE once again, and then finally arrive back inside of Oman, switching back and forth between the countries a total of 6 times. But the other situation for this is surprisingly Cyprus, which if you ever take a glance at their flag, you would think that everything looks clean and orderly, but that's far, far from the case. There are actually 4 territorial entities on the island. The country that almost everybody recognizes that this not-so-accurate flag belongs to, called the Republic of Cyprus, the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus in the north that is recognized by only one other country, Turkey, 2 separate, fully sovereign British military bases here, and then finally a United Nations buffer zone that stretches across most of the island that is occupied by the UN peacekeeping forces. This strange situation has a very complicated history, but the very short version of it is that Cyprus became independent in 1960, but the British were allowed to hold on to some of the territory that became their current military bases. Cyprus was annexed by Greece, but Turkey invaded to stop that from happening, captured a bunch of territory, and then declared the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus as an independent country. And then the UN built a wall across the entire island to separate the 2 sides and guarantee an awkward peace. And awkward it continues to be, as the Turkish Republic has a strange exclave over here that is completely walled off from the rest of the island. The eastern British military base has 3 enclaves of the Republic of Cyprus inside of it, which means that Cypriot citizens inside of them are totally surrounded by British territory and have to cross through several kilometers of an active foreign military base just to visit the rest of their own country. Finally, this large chunk of the Republic of Cyprus is totally cut off from the rest of the country since it's bordered by the UN buffer zone in the north and the UK military base to the west, which makes just taking a boat possibly the easiest way of getting to the other part of the country. Finally, for this video, we move to perhaps the most complicated series of borders in the entire world. This mess in Central Asia between Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan. Upon taking a closer look, we can see that there are 4 Uzbek enclaves located entirely inside of Kyrgyzstan, 1 Kyrgyz enclave inside of Uzbekistan, 2 Tajik enclaves located inside of Kyrgyzstan, and 1 Turkmen enclave located inside of Uzbekistan. The reason that these exist in 2 words is Joseph Stalin, and 2 of the enclaves are particularly awkward. The Kyrgyz enclave inside of Uzbekistan is home to over 1,000 people but has no post office, no government buildings, no banks, and the only employment opportunities are at a small general store. The enclave is totally surrounded by the Uzbek military, and even though many Kyrgyz citizens living inside of it have petitioned the Kyrgyzstan government to return to the mainland, the government has rejected allowing anybody inside to return out of fear of losing the incredibly valuable enclave to Uzbekistan. But perhaps the strangest and most insane border in the entire world that makes the least amount of sense is this territory called Sok, which is a fully sovereign territory of Uzbekistan that is completely surrounded on all sides by Kyrgyzstan, all while 99% of the population inside of it are ethnic Tajiks. The world can be quite a mess in some places. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed what you just watched, I hope that you'll subscribe to my channel by clicking here. If you're interested in supporting the channel and voting on future video topics, then you can click here to visit my Patreon. You can watch some older videos of mine over here on the left, and I hope to see you again next Friday for another new video then. This is a video by Real Life Lore, made possible by Squarespace. Make your next move with Squarespace. Humanity has been around for about 200,000 years and has experienced a massive amount of change already. From our starting point in Africa, we've managed to colonize the entire world at this point and even reached as far away as the moon. The Bering Land Bridge that once connected Asia and North America with one another has long since been submerged beneath the ocean. So if humanity exists for another million years, then what additional changes or events can we reasonably expect to happen? Well, starting at about 10,000 years into the future, we will encounter the year 10,000 problem. Software that encodes the AD calendar year as a 4-digit decimal will no longer be able to encode dates starting at 10,000 AD. It will be a real Y10K, and in addition, if current trends of globalization continues, then human genetic variation will no longer be regionalized by this point, meaning that all human genetic traits like skin color and hair color will be evenly distributed across the world. In 20,000 years from now, future languages will only contain 1 out of every 100 core vocabulary words with their present-day counterparts. Essentially, no modern language will be recognizable by this point. In 50,000 years, Earth will enter into another glacial period regardless of current global warming effects. Niagara Falls will have completely eroded away into Lake Erie and cease to exist, and due to glacial rebound and erosion, the many lakes of the Canadian Shield will also cease to exist. Also, 1 full day on Earth will have increased by 1 full second, requiring a leap second to be added to every day. In 100,000 years from now, the stars and constellations visible from Earth will be completely different than they are from today. Also, this is the estimated amount of time that it would take to fully terraform Mars into a habitable planet similar to the Earth. In 250,000 years, the Loihi volcano will rise above the surface and form a new island in the Hawaiian island chain. In 500,000 years from now, Earth will have likely been struck by an asteroid measuring 1 kilometer in diameter unless humanity artificially prevents it. Additionally, the Badlands National Park in South Dakota will have completely eroded away by this point. In 950,000 years, the meteor crater in Arizona, which is considered the best preserved meteorite impact crater on Earth, will have completely eroded away. In 1 million years, Earth will have likely experienced a supervolcanic eruption large enough to erupt 3,200 cubic kilometers of ash, an event similar to the Toba supereruption 70,000 years ago that almost made humanity extinct. In addition, the star Betelgeuse will have exploded into a supernova by this point, and the explosion will be easily visible from Earth even during the daytime. In 2 million years, the Grand Canyon will have eroded even more significantly, slightly deepening, but it will mostly widen out into a large valley. If humanity has colonized different planets in the solar system and the universe by this point, and the populations on each planet have remained separate from one another, then humanity will have likely evolved into various different species at this point. These different human species will be adapted to their different planets and may not be aware of the other human species located in the rest of the universe. In 10 million years, a large part of East Africa will split off from the rest of the continent. A new ocean basin will form between the two sides, and Africa will be divided into two separate land masses. In 50 million years, Phobos, a moon of Mars, will collide with the planet, causing massive destruction there. Back on Earth, the remaining part of Africa will collide with Eurasia and close off the Mediterranean Sea forever. A new mountain range similar in size to the Himalayas will form between the now connected land masses and may possibly produce a mountain that is higher than Mount Everest. In 60 million years, the Canadian Rockies will have completely eroded into a flat plain. In 80 million years from now, all of the Hawaiian Islands will have sunk back beneath the ocean. And in 100 million years, the Earth will have likely been struck by an asteroid similar to the event that wiped out the dinosaurs 66 million years ago, assuming of course that it isn't artificially prevented. In addition, at this point in the future, the rings around the planet Saturn will no longer exist. In 240 million years, Earth will have finally completed one full orbit around the galactic center from its current position. In 250 million years, all of the continents on Earth will have fused together to form a supercontinent similar to Pangaea. A possible name for this continent is Pangaea Ultima, and it will probably look something sort of like this image. Then, in 400 to 500 million years, the supercontinent will break apart once again. In 500 to 600 million years, a deadly gamma ray burst will likely occur within 6,500 light years of Earth. If conditions are right, or wrong if you prefer, the burst could strike Earth and severely damage the ozone layer, which would cause a mass extinction event. In 600 million years, the Moon will have moved far enough away from Earth that total solar eclipses will no longer be possible after this date. In addition, the Sun's increasing luminosity will cause severe effects on Earth. Plate tectonic movements will stop at this point, and carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere will decrease dramatically. C3 photosynthesis will no longer be possible at this point, and 99% of current plant life on Earth will die. In 800 million years, carbon dioxide levels will continue to fall to the point where C4 photosynthesis will no longer be possible. Free oxygen and ozone disappear from the atmosphere, and all complex life on Earth will die. Finally, in 1 billion years, the Sun's luminosity will have increased 10% from its current state. The surface temperature on Earth will rise to a sweltering 47 degrees Celsius on average. The atmosphere will turn into a moist greenhouse, and the world's oceans will evaporate away. Pockets of liquid water may still exist at the Earth's poles, however, which means that it will probably become the last bastion of life on our planet. A lot will change over the course of a billion years, but a lot has changed in the last billion years as well. In addition to the things that we've talked about in this video, who knows what else a billion years could bring? This video was made possible by Squarespace. If you are wanting to create a new website for your next project, then Squarespace is the absolute easiest way of doing it. I've personally used them before for several different projects, and what I think is best about them is that you don't need any programming skills in order to make a beautiful website. It's incredibly easy and can be done in just a few minutes, and there's always someone to call 24/7 if you ever need any help. You can create a blog, a store, a page for your music, art, or really just about anything. And what's best of all is that you can get 10% off of your first order by using the code RealLifeLore over at squarespace.com/reallifalore. That also means that you'll be directly supporting my channel and help me to create additional new videos. So please go ahead and check them out over at squarespace.com/reallifalore. If you enjoyed what you just watched, then I hope that you'll subscribe to my channel by clicking here. You can visit my Patreon if you want to support the channel in other ways by clicking over here. You can check out some older videos of mine over on the left, and I hope to see you next week again on Friday. Remember to video then. This is a video by Real Life Lore made possible by Skillshare. surpassed 7.5 billion people. There are more human beings alive on this planet right now than at any other point in our planet's history. But a strange question that you may have never thought about is this one. How many humans have ever existed through the thousands of years of our history? And what would happen if somehow every single one of these humans who had ever existed was brought back to life at the same age and in the same geographical location that they were in when they died? First, it is estimated that ever since the year 50,000 BC, which is a good starting date for the emergence of truly modern humans, there have been a total of 108.2 billion human beings who have ever been born. Since the current global population is 7.5 billion, that means that a shocking 7% of all humans who have ever existed are currently alive right now. What's perhaps even more interesting, though, is how that ratio of the living to the dead will increase in the future. The global population in 2050, for example, is expected to reach 9.7 billion people, which means that at that point, the amount of living humans will represent 8.6% of all humans who have ever existed. But even still by then, the number of dead humans will outnumber the living by 11 to 1. So what would happen if every single human who has ever died suddenly all reappear back to life right now in 2017? Firstly, that would mean that 100.7 million people would be added to the global population. In a previous video, I explained that if you took the 7.5 or so billion people currently alive and moved into an area as crowded as the capital walled city, then the entire world population would fit into an area roughly the same size of the state of Palestine. If you took the 100.7 billion dead people and moved them into the same population density, then they would all fit into an area roughly the same size of Austria. Maybe if we wanted something a little more comfortable and fit everybody into the same population density of downtown Manhattan, then the living would fit into an area the size of Ecuador, while the dead would fit into an area the size of Argentina. But what would the 100.7 billion dead people actually look like? Well, they would probably be mostly very young. For most of human history, life expectancy was very low and child mortality rates were very high. Life expectancy until the end of the Neolithic era, for example, is believed to have been just 33 years. But life expectancy is believed to have actually decreased to just 26 years during the Bronze and Iron Ages. Life expectancy in classical Greece was just 28 years, and in classical Rome it was between 20 and 30 years. Much of this is due to the fact that most children during this time period would die before the age of 10. In the Roman Empire, for example, if a child survived until 10, then their life expectancy dramatically increased from 20 to 30 years at birth up to 47.5 years. Pre-Columbian American life expectancy was between 25 and 30 years, and perhaps the highest life expectancy anywhere in the world before the Industrial Revolution was within the medieval Islamic Caliphate, where the average person at birth was expected to survive past the age of 35. For comparison, the lowest life expectancy anywhere in the world currently is in Sierra Leone, where it is 50.1 years. Wealthy, noble, or educated dead people, however, would be much older. Scholars in the medieval Caliphate had much higher life expectancies than the average person, approaching 69 to 75 years old, and English aristocrats in the year 1500 had life expectancies as high as 71 years, which, interestingly, is the same life expectancy as the global average today, meaning that the average human born anywhere in the world today will likely live to be as old as an elite member of the English nobility did 500 years ago. With all of this data, it is therefore probably safe to assume that the majority of the dead brought back to life will be much younger than the current world population is. Perhaps even a majority of them would be children or infants, and certainly most would be under the age of 33. The only other two things that we can probably know with a reasonable amount of certainty is that there would probably be more males than females, since in the modern world the amount of babies born are about 51% male and 49% female. And if that's always been true, then it's probable that a majority of the dead are male. Finally, most of the dead would appear in rural areas of the world, since historically most of the world's population has lived in the country. As recently as 1950, only 29% of the world's population lived in cities, so yeah, there would be an overwhelming amount of country folk in the dead population. Obviously, such a massive and sudden influx of population would put an incredible strain on global resources. There are estimates that our planet may be able to support a population of 10 billion humans, so if 100.7 billion people suddenly popped back into existence increase very quickly. It's likely that around 90% of the world population with combined living and previously dead would die from starvation within 2 months of the event happening. A huge majority of the people brought back to life would return to their graves very shortly as a result of this. More than likely, after the initial shock of 100 million people returning to the planet was over, a massive global war would follow over the control of scarce food, water, and other resources. The end result would be most people perishing and the world would likely stabilize around a population of 10 billion a couple of months later, meaning that maybe around 2.5 billion of the previously dead humans, or a little over 2%, would survive the apocalypse and coexist with the currently living humans afterwards. Regardless of how totally ludicrous and impossible of a situation this actually is, it's still interesting to think that right now you get to know 7% of the amount of humans who have ever existed, and you'll never get to know the other 93% of humans who existed before your time. This video was helped made possible by Skillshare. If you enjoy watching and learning from my videos, then Skillshare is another great resource that you can use for additional learning. It's an online community for creators that's home to over 15,000 classes in design, photography, productivity, and more. You can take a class, try a project, or even teach a class yourself. And best of all, you can get an exclusive 2-month free trial by clicking the link in the description of this video. You'll be directly supporting my channel, and you'll also get 2 free months of unlimited classes. And if you enjoy the site, then membership begins at around $10 a month after your free 2-month trial is over. So thanks again for watching this video. If you're interested in future videos just like this one, then I hope you'll subscribe to my channel by clicking here. You can visit my Patreon and vote on future video topics by clicking here. Check out some older videos of mine over on the left, and I hope to see you again for another new video next Friday. Perhaps no symbol great. Tanks. There is perhaps no symbol greater of modern warfare than the tank, and in this video we're going to take a look at some of the most ridiculously oversized tanks that have ever been designed. To begin with something a little familiar, we're going to start with the American-made M1 Abrams main battle tank, which is still currently used in service. The vehicle weighs a mighty 62 metric tons, equal to the weight of about 49 2016 Toyota Corollas. It possesses a main gun of 105mm, meaning the shell that it fires from the turret is 105mm in diameter. There are 3 secondary machine guns located around the tank as well, and the vehicle is crewed by a 4-man team. Individually, each M1 Abrams tank costs $8.92 million to produce, but this is just scratching the surface of monstrously huge tanks in history. Arguably, the largest tank in terms of physical dimensions ever built was way back in the First World War and was made by the French. It was named the Char 2C and features a prominent role in the latest Battlefield 1 expansion pack. It was designed in 1917 when the First World War was still raging, but the first unit wasn't actually built until 1921, 3 years after the war had ended. The tank weighed 69 metric tons, a little heavier than the modern Abrams M1, and featured a 75mm main cannon along with 4 secondary machine guns placed in the front, the sides, and the rear of the vehicle. This monster tank was 10.27 meters long and 3 meters wide. It took a crew of 12 men to fully operate the machine, but France only ever built 10 of them, which wasn't enough to turn the tide of World War II when the Germans attacked again. However, an even more absurd tank from the First World War was the German-designed Wagon. This beast was so large that it was impossible to transport it in its fully built form, so the Germans had to disassemble it into 6 separate pieces, transport it by rail, and reassemble it just behind the front lines. One such tank actually was finished just before the war ended, but never actually saw service because Germany surrendered before it could be used. If it had been utilized, however, the Western Front would have witnessed a 120 metric ton monster, nearly twice the weight of a modern M1 Abrams tank. It was 13 meters long, just 2 meters shorter than the width of an NBA basketball court. It came equipped with not 1, but 4 different 77mm Fortress guns and 7 MG08 machine guns. It was intended to have a crew of 27 men. tank still to this day that has ever actually been built, and weighed an enormous 188 metric tons, nearly 3.5 times the weight of a modern M1 Abrams tank. This behemoth featured a 128mm main gun capable of destroying any Allied tank in the war from a distance of 3.5 kilometers. It also had a secondary 75mm cannon, as well as one machine gun. It possessed 220mm of steel armor plating on the front and was intended to be operated by a crew of 6 men. Because of its sheer size, however, it faced numerous problems. Firstly, it was so heavy that it couldn't drive over any bridges without collapsing beneath its own weight. So if it needed to cross a river, then it had to go underneath it, and the crew would use a snorkel to pump air into the main cabin, which is just ridiculous. Finally, if there ever was a real-life boss battle against an evil enemy worthy of a video game, it would have been against the German-designed Landkreuzer P-1000 Ratte. Personally approved by Adolf Hitler himself, the Finnish tank was intended to weigh 1,000 metric tons, which is over 5 times heavier than even the Panzer VIII Maus, and over 16 times heavier than a modern M1 Abrams tank. 300 tons of the total weight would have been devoted entirely to munitions like shells for the cannons and bullets for the machine guns. It was planned to be 39 meters long, longer than the length of an NBA basketball court, as well as 14 meters wide, which is roughly the same width of a basketball court. The monster tank would have been powered by 2 24-cylinder marine diesel engines, the same engines that were used to power U-boat submarines. This would have given the tank an unbelievable 16,000 horsepower that could have propelled it up to speeds of 40 kilometers per hour. The Landkreuzer's primary weapon would have been a dual 280mm SK-C/28 turret. This was the same turret that was used on Germany's main battleships. And to put that into perspective, the barrel of the Landkreuzer cannon would have been almost 4 times wider than the barrel of the modern Abrams battle tank. In addition to this terrifying main cannon, the Landkreuzer was also armed with a 128mm anti-tank gun, which means that its secondary cannon was the same size as the main cannon on the Panzer VIII Maus. It also would be equipped with 2 15mm Mauser autocannons capable of shredding smaller vehicles to pieces, and a total of 8 28mm Flak 38 anti-air guns to defend the behemoth against air attacks. The tank also would have been equipped with a vehicle bay that could hold 2 motorcycles for scouting operations. It had its own medical room and even had its own bathroom. It was intended to be operated by a crew of 41 men, but a tank of this size was doomed for failure from the start. It was never built because it was determined that despite being armed with 8 anti-aircraft guns, the tank would still be too large of a target for enemy planes to attack.
This wild experimentation with tank design could well have cost Germany the war. Germany gained the majority of their territory in the first year of World War II, when their tanks were inferior to the Allies. Their success was largely a result of their overwhelming numbers and speed when attacking, not having the best tank. By the time the invasion of Russia began, Germany had the most advanced tanks, but they were met with what seemed to be a never-ending army of T-34 tanks. A fantastic yet crudely constructed tank. It was designed with high speed and low cost of manufacturing in mind. The blitzkrieg was finally halted at the Battle of Kursk, the largest tank battle in the history of humankind. This battle depleted the German war effort like no other, and the Germans would struggle to take a step forward again.
Please make sure to go watch Real Engineering's video next for more fascinating tank information. If you enjoyed what you just watched, then I hope that you'll subscribe to my channel by clicking here. You can visit my Patreon if you'd like to support the channel by clicking here, and I hope to see you again for another new video too. This episode of Real Life Lore is made possible by Hover. Get your unique domain and email by going to hover.com/realliflore and using the code RealLifeLore for 10% off at checkout. Earth is a complicated place. There are a lot of us that share this planet together, and it's sometimes difficult to understand who everybody is and what everybody believes. To understand things a little better, let's shrink the entire world population down from 7.5 billion people all the way down two-person society as similar to the real world as possible. Dividing between gender, the 100-person world would be equally divided between 50 men and 50 women. Most of these people would live in Asia, a total of 59 people, compared to 16 people living in Africa, 10 living in Europe, 8 in North America, only 6 in South America, and just one lonely person living in Australia and Oceania. 19 of these people would be Chinese citizens, and another 18 would be Indians. There would be only 4 Americans, 3 Brazilians, 2 Russians, and 1 German. The other 53 people would be citizens of 187 other countries around the world. Most of these people would be pretty young, with 9 people aged just between 0 and 4 years old. 17 people would be aged between 5 and 14 years old, and 16 people would be aged between 15 and 24 years old. Another 16 people would be aged between 25 and 34, which means that 58 total people are younger than 35 years old. 20 people would be between 35 and 49, just 14 people would be aged 50 to 64, and only 8 people would be above the age of 65. When we talk about religion in the group of 100, 31 people would adhere to Christianity, 23 would be Muslims, 15 would be Hindus, 7 would be Buddhists, 9 would follow other religions, and 15 people would be non-religious or atheists. Mandarin Chinese is the most understood language, with 14 people understanding it, but English isn't far behind it, with 13 people understanding it. 9 people understand Hindustani, 8 people understand Spanish, and 5 people understand Arabic, with the other 51 people speaking over 7,000 other languages. Mostly everybody can read and write, with 86 people possessing this ability, but there are still 14 people who are illiterate. 92 people have access to clean and safe drinking water, when 8 people do not and struggle as a result. 62 people are healthy in their weight, but 11 people are malnourished and 1 person is literally starving. The other 26 people are overweight, and 8 of those people are actually obese. 21 people do not have adequate housing to fully protect themselves from the elements, and 1 person is homeless. The other 78 people, however, do have proper housing for themselves. Only 60 people have access to toilets, though, and the other 40 people do not. Of those 40 people, 15 of them still defecate out in the open outdoors. 54 people live in cities, while the other 46 people live out in the countryside. 9 people are currently unemployed, while the other 91 people either are employed or are outside of the labor force. One of these people has AIDS, and 5 people will be affected by some form of STD this year alone. 58 people are currently married, and the average age that people get married at is 29 for women and 32 for men. Another 15 people actively smoke tobacco products, while the other 85 people do not. Interestingly enough, the same statistic is true of vehicle ownership, with 15 people owning a motor vehicle and another 85 people not owning one. Most people are overwhelmingly right-handed, with only 10 people being left-handed. 73 people have or are expected to graduate from high school, while the other 27 people haven't or are not expected to graduate. However, only 7 people hold a college degree of any kind, while the other 93 people do not. But that doesn't stop most people from owning a cell phone. 80 people are in possession of one, while the other 20 people do not have one. This means that yes, more people have access to a cell phone in the world than a toilet. Internet access is also much more uncommon than cell phone ownership, with only 42 people having access to it and the other 58 people not having any access to it. Speaking of the people with internet access, however, 26 of them have a Facebook profile, 17 of them have a YouTube account, and 4 of them use Twitter at least once per month. But perhaps the most shocking difference in our small group of 100 people is the distribution of wealth between them. 71 people have a net worth of under $10,000, and out of them, 12 people are living on less than $2 per day. 21 people have a net worth between $10,000 and $100,000, and 7 people have a net worth between $100,000 and $1 million. There is only one person who actually has a net worth above $1 million, but this one person is vastly more wealthy than even this chart makes it appear. This one person owns 50% of all the money in the world. The next 9 people own 35% of all the money in the world, so to recap, 10 people together control 85% of all the money in the society. Another 20 people owns 12% of the global money supply, which means that 70 people, the vast majority of the society, only controls a mere 3% of the money supply. In addition, one person is a refugee or currently displaced from their home, and 2 people are named Muhammad, which is the most common name in the world currently. Finally, all 100 people currently live on Earth, our home. Within a few years, however, who knows how all of this data may be different. So this video was made possible by Hover. I actually just recently bought 2 new domains with Hover. Whataworld.fm for my super secret upcoming podcast series with fellow YouTuber Second Thought, and realliflore.net so I can finally have my own website. What's great about both of them is how easy it was to find them and connect both of them to a hosting provider through Hover. The entire process of finding and buying both domains and connecting them to a provider took under a minute to actually do. If you are looking to build your presence on the internet, having your own site is incredibly important, and the ending extension can truly set you apart. Hover has over 400 different extensions like .fm, .net, or even .ninja or .lol. You can also set up your own private email account through that domain once you buy it, which further increases your professional presence online. Whatever you'd like to get through Hover, you can get 10% off your first order and help out Real Life Lore by going to hover.com/reallife. This episode of Real Life Lore is made possible by Hover. Get your unique domain and email by going to hover.com/reallifelore and using the code RealLifeLore for 10% off at checkout. Black holes are one of the most bizarre things that we know of in the universe. Mathematically speaking, any object that has mass can become a black hole. That means that you, me, whatever you're watching this video on right now, and everything else can become a black hole if you crush it all into a small enough space. This space is called the Schwarzschild radius. If you condense all the matter of any object into its individual Schwarzschild radius, the object will become so unimaginably dense that nothing can escape its gravitational pull, not even light. If you wanted to transform yourself into a black hole, then you would have to find a way to condense all of the matter that makes up your body into an area 1/6 billion times smaller than a grain of sand. But the larger the amount of mass that gets crushed down into a black hole, the stranger the effect can possibly be. Let's take a Boeing 777 jet for instance. If somehow the jet suddenly transformed into a black hole, its entire mass would be compacted into an area with an unimaginably tiny radius of just 3.386 to the power of -22 meters. For comparison, the smallest atom is a hydrogen atom, which has a radius of just 10 to the power of -11 meters in size. This would be like comparing the size of a human red blood cell to the entire island of Sicily, an incredible difference in scale that's difficult to really wrap your head around. This outrageously tiny black hole would also not last long at all because of the effect of Hawking radiation, which would completely evaporate away the entire mass of the object in just 1 second. At this point, something else incredibly strange happens. The entire mass of the tiny black hole would be converted into an insanely high amount of energy equal to 5 billion megatons of TNT. That is 87,000 times more powerful than the largest nuclear bomb that humanity has ever detonated, and it would be enough to completely obliterate the entire planet. If you wanted to transform Mount Everest into a black hole, you would need to crush the entire mountain into a space smaller than a nanometer, which is just 1/billionth of a meter in length, or the size of 10 helium atoms placed side by side of each other. It's completely unthinkable, so perhaps if we transformed a larger object like the Earth into a black hole, then things might be easier to understand. If we did this, the entire planet, everything that you've ever known, loved, or hated, every person and everything that has ever existed here would have to all be crushed into a space the size of just a single US penny. If you replaced the Earth with this penny-sized black hole, nothing would change in our solar system. Our moon would continue to orbit the penny-sized black hole as if nothing had actually happened, because the mass would remain equal. If you wanted to transform the sun into a black hole, however, you would have to condense the entire thing into a space with a radius of just 3 kilometers. Such a space would only be the length of about 1.5 Central Parks, but it would contain the mass of the entire sun inside of it. Once a black hole has formed, though, it can continue to grow in size by absorbing additional matter like nearby gas and dust from its surroundings. Or on occasion, they can even consume entire stars and solar systems. They can even consume other smaller black holes to rapidly grow in size and ferocity. Let's take the black hole XTE J1650-500 for example, which is believed to be the smallest black hole ever yet discovered. It has a radius of just 12 kilometers, which is a little larger than the island of Manhattan, but contains somewhere between a mass of 5 to 10 suns inside of that tiny area. And there are still far larger beasts than even this lurking out in space. Take another black hole in GCIRS 13e. There are a number of questions surrounding this one's potential existence, but if it's real, then its size is roughly the same as the continent of Europe, all while containing the mass of 1,300 suns inside of it. But even this is insanely tiny compared to a few more that are out there, like ARX-1, which is designated as an intermediate-sized black hole. It has a radius of 295,300 kilometers, so it's about as wide as 4 Jupiters placed side by side, but it contains the mind-boggling mass of 100,000 suns inside of it. Lurking in the center of the Milky Way galaxy, however, is a supermassive class black hole known as Sagittarius A. It has a huge radius of 12,700,000 kilometers, about 5% of the distance between Earth and Venus. But this monster contains the ridiculous mass of 4,300,000 suns inside of that area. As insane as that sounds, though, we have yet to arrive at the largest known black hole in the entire universe. The monster with the extremely ominous name of S50014+81. This titan is sometimes classed into an entirely separate class of black holes, the ultra-massive class. Its radius is 1,600 times greater than the distance between the Earth and the Sun, and contains the mass of 40 billion suns. Let that sink in for a moment. Take the Sun, which is already unbelievably huge compared to anything else on a human scale, and then multiply that by 40 billion times, and you have the mass of this behemoth black hole. And if you're curious, that's also equal to this many Toyota Corollas, which is a number that is so unfathomably huge that I'm not even going to attempt to say it. You can just look at it and understand it's a lot. So this video was made possible by Hover. I said last time that I recently purchased 2 new domains through them, one for my upcoming podcast series at whataworld.fm, and the other for my personal website at reallifelore.net. What was great about getting them through Hover was how incredibly easy and fast the process was. I simply looked up the domain name that I wanted, clicked to add it to my cart, and checked out all within just 1 minute. They show you a list of prices and don't hassle you with needless add-ons. The price they show you is the price that you pay. If you're looking to build your presence on the internet, then having your own site is incredibly important, and the ending extension can truly set you apart. Alaska. It's a vast and enormous landmass, inside of which you can fit all of Texas, California, New York, Florida, Pennsylvania, Illinois, and New Jersey. Those states have a combined population of 142 million people. Alaska has a population of just 738,000, or just 0.005% of the same population. And located here at the northern edge of the state is an interesting town called Barrow. This isn't going to be a normal video from me, because unlike all of my previous videos, I actually went here in person to film this. Barrow is located well into the Arctic Circle, and is just a mere 2,100 kilometers away from the North Pole, which makes it the northernmost city in the United States. Over 4,200 people live here in an environment where the temperature will remain below freezing for 8 months from early October until late May. The high temperature is only above freezing for around 120 days of the entire year, and there are 160 days of below freezing temperatures every year. However, freezing temperatures and snowfall can happen in any month, including during the summer months of June through August. When the sun sets below the horizon on November 18th or 19th, it won't rise back above the horizon for another 65 days. This is known as the long polar night, and the sun will stay beneath the horizon for about 2 months. The opposite happens during the summertime. When the sun rises on May 11th, it won't set back beneath the horizon again for another 8 or so days. This is known as the long midnight sun, where the town is cast in unending daylight. Despite the permanent presence of the sun, however, the temperature remains very cold, averaging 21.2 degrees Fahrenheit during May and 35.7 degrees in June. July is the warmest month the town experiences all year, with an average high temperature of 47 degrees and an average low of 35 degrees. The highest temperature ever recorded in the town was 79 degrees, while the lowest was negative 56 degrees. But even in July and August, the low temperature will fall beneath the freezing mark for 24 days. Because of its location right next to the Arctic Ocean, Barrow is also one of the cloudiest places on the planet. The town is completely overcast for slightly more than 50% of the entire year, and it's located so far north that if you went to the opposite side of the world from Barrow, you would be located in Antarctica. This point right here is called Point Barrow and is the northernmost point of the entire mainland North American continent. To stand here is to literally stand at the end of the entire North and South American mainland landmass that begins at the southern tip of South America. To go any further north, you would either have to venture into the icy expanse of the Arctic Ocean or go to the islands of the Canadian archipelago. To get here, however, is somewhat difficult. Barrow is a very remote place, and there are no roads that connect the town to the outside world. It's an isolated community that's impossible to drive into or out of, so the only way in or out for most of the year is to fly through the town's small airport. Despite this incredible isolation, Barrow really is a true town. Inside the city you can find a post office, a high school, a bank, a police department, a fire department, restaurants, a grocery store, and hundreds of houses. When the ice in the ocean melts during the summer, you can take a boat into town. A large ferry that brings supplies to the town like cars and ATVs comes just once per year during this time. But since the water is frozen for most of the year, getting in by ship is usually impossible, making air travel the only feasible way for not only people to get in or out, but also supplies. Food, gasoline, alcohol, mail, and just about everything else has to be flown into the city. This makes everything in town extremely expensive. From $17 DiGiorno pizzas to $40 bottles of detergent, living in Barrow is not only freezing cold, but also incredibly expensive. I know that this wasn't a usual video for me, and I'm not sure how well that it will go over, so please let me know in the comments if you'd like to see more content like this in the future. Also, when I went to Barrow, I didn't travel alone. I also went with two other YouTube channels that you may already be familiar with, Wendover Productions and Second Thought. If you enjoyed this video, then you should go ahead and check out their videos next if you want to learn more about Barrow and what it's like living there. This video was also helped made possible by my incredible patrons over at Patreon, so if you'd like to support the channel in any way, then you can visit my Patreon by clicking here. If you'd like to see more photos from our trip to Barrow, then make sure to go ahead and visit our Instagram. The United States has been a united country ever since the end of the Civil War in 1865. As probably most of you know, the two dominant parties in modern-day America are the Republican and Democratic parties. Each party has a varying amount of influence in each of the 50 U.S. states. So what if instead of the current reality of a unified United States, there was a reality where instead all of the Republican states formed their own independent country, and all of the Democrat states formed their own independent country? First, let's define which states are either Republican or Democrat states in the first place. My definition is that if a state voted for the same party in 3 or all 4 of the past 4 presidential elections, then it belongs to that party. This definition only leaves 3 swing states that voted for each party equally in the past 4 presidential elections. But I'm going to give all 3 of them to the Republican country because their state legislatures currently, as of 2017, are controlled by the Republicans. So, this is what a map of the two countries would look like. The Republican country is all connected together except for Alaska up in the north, while the Democrat country is divided into 5 separate parts in the east, the north, the west, the size of 1,377,000 soldiers, assuming all the soldiers in each state they were originally from returned home. The Democrats, meanwhile, would have a larger budget of $239.17 billion US, even larger than China's, but would begin with less soldiers at 1,296,000 troops. Both countries would have a similar unemployment rate as well, with 4.4% in the Democrat country and 4.6% in the Republican country. Each country would have its fair share of large cities as well, with the top 5 largest in each being Austin, Dallas, San Antonio, Phoenix, and Houston in the case of the Republicans, and San Diego, Philadelphia, Chicago, Los Angeles, and New York in the case of the Democrats. I expect that the capital city of the Republicans would become Austin, since Texas would essentially become the financial and population center of the country, owing to the fact that 4 out of 5 of the largest cities are all located there. The capital for the Democrats, meanwhile, would be Washington, D.C., the current U.S. capital that makes the most sense for them since the neighboring states of Maryland and Virginia are also Democrat states. As much as Texas would be the most influential state in the Republican country, California would be the most influential in the Democrat one, since it would boast the largest single economy and population. If this ever were to become a reality, however, both countries would be largely equal. The Democrats would have a larger economy and a higher GDP per capita, but they would both be nuclear power states and both have extremely powerful conventional militaries as well. They would be the second and third largest economies and have almost equal population. Essentially, they would be evenly matched in most regards. It would be best if the United States stayed together, of course, but it's still fun to theorize. Please leave your comments below about what you think the world scenario would actually look like. What would life be like, and would conflict between the two Americas be inevitable, or could it be avoided? If you enjoyed what you just watched, then I hope that you'll subscribe to my channel by clicking here. You can visit my Patreon and vote on upcoming videos just like this one, but hello there, everybody. Recently, my channel just surpassed the milestone of 1 million subscribers, which is a number so huge that I can't exactly make sense of it. I wish that I could thank each and every one of you individually, but that would take forever, so this video will have to do for now. I've created some interesting data and facts about this channel from my YouTube analytics page that I'd like to share with all of you. First, 90% of you watching this video are most likely male, and 10% are female, so hello and thank you to all of you. Over the past year and 4 months since I created this channel, you have all watched a total of 850 years worth of my videos. That's incredible to think that much time has been spent or wasted watching my videos instead of working or studying, but I like to think that my videos bring their own kind of productivity in the form of information or knowledge, so hopefully it balances out a little. Of all the 1 million plus of you who are currently subscribed to my channel, a good chunk of you live in the United States, followed by the United Kingdom, Canada, India, Australia, Germany, the Philippines, the Netherlands, Sweden, and Brazil. I have at least one subscriber from every single country in the world except for the following: the Central African Republic, Chad, Eritrea, Kosovo, North Korea, Turkmenistan, and Western Sahara. So if you're watching this video and you live in any of these countries, I hope that you'll consider subscribing so that I can say Real Life Lore has subscribers across every country in the world the next time that I do one of these. It's crazy to see that I have had people watch my videos in some pretty weird locations as well. For example, people in North Korea have logged in 25 minutes watching my videos, and people in Antarctica have logged in 26 minutes. I don't have any subscribers from those places, but I know people are watching from there. Now, as I promised, let's move on to the actual Q&A part of the video. Question 1. Why are you not doing a face reveal? The funny part about this is that you can find my face on the internet pretty easily, and I'll even give you a few clues as to how to do it. The first thing you can do is to visit my Instagram account, which mostly includes pictures of JT, who runs Second Thought, and me on our travels together. Also, Second Thought, Wendover Productions, and I all recently went to Alaska and each made our own videos about it. I'm directly in one of them, so you can watch all 3 and be guaranteed to see me in a part of them. Question 2. What is your name? You can call me Joseph. Question 3. Where do you live? Currently, I live in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex in Texas, which is a weird place to be living, but it happens to be where I've lived for the past 20 or so years. Based on some calculations I did, there are over 7,000 people in the Dallas-Fort Worth area who are subscribed to my channel, so hello to all of you out there watching this right now. Question 4. How old are you? I'm 24 years old as of the posting of this video. Question 5. What did you study in university? I have a Bachelor of Arts degree in International Relations and a minor in Russian language. I was just 6 classes away from obtaining an economics degree as well, but recently dropped out of that to pursue creating videos on this channel full-time. Question 6. What do you edit your videos with? I use the Adobe Creative Suite for all of my videos, mostly After Effects, Photoshop, Audition, and Premiere Pro. Question 7. Are there any other channels that you know in real life or really enjoy? Of course, I've actually known JT from Second Thought and Andrew from the Royal Ocean Film Society for years, since before we even started college. I think that my most favorite part about YouTube so far has been meeting so many other incredible and talented creators. Some of my most favorite other channels include Wendover Productions, Real Engineering, Kurzgesagt, CGP Grey, and Minute Physics, just to list a few. Question 8. Who produces your music? A good friend of mine named Brandon Moss creates my music. He's incredible, and you can check out his soundtrack and Patreon in the description. Question 9. Do you have a team that helps produce these videos, or is it all just you? Other than the music, I run this entire channel by myself, and it's always been that way so far. I use my own voice, I research all the videos myself, and I animate and edit everything by myself. It's a lot of work, but I find it extremely rewarding. Question 10. What place on Earth do you want to travel to the most? Honestly, but I would really like to visit Montenegro for the geographical significance of it. I am American, but through family history, I do qualify for Italian citizenship. I've never been to Italy before, but I would love to visit since I may be becoming a citizen there soon. I also speak Russian fairly well since studying it in college, but I've never been and I'd like to change that. So if there's any Italians or Russians watching this video, let me know and I'd love to visit. Question 11. What is your favorite video that you've ever made? My favorite video was the one about how far away you can get from everybody else. I just loved the research going into that video and found it fascinating. Question 12. How is the writing of that book coming along? I'm still writing it. I announced it at the end of one of my previous videos, but it's still being worked on. I'm a very slow writer, especially since most of my focus is writing scripts and researching ideas for videos on this channel, but the book is coming, I promise. I'll make an official announcement once it's actually finished and ready. Question 13. What are your plans for the future of this channel? I have very big plans for the future of this channel. It's mostly to keep producing more and more informational and entertaining videos. I have a few secret ideas that I'll reveal at a later time, but if you have any suggestions, feel free to send them to me. Question 14. When and why did you create this channel? I created this channel back in February of 2016. It began as a hobby while I was finishing up my international relations degree at the university and became my full-time job later in October of that year. Eventually, I even dropped out of university while studying my second degree just this past spring semester. I created it to inform, educate, and entertain people about subjects that I really care about and think are interesting and important. If you weren't doing YouTube right now, what would you be doing instead, or what would you want to be doing? So when I went to university, I dreamed about getting my degree and becoming a U.S. diplomat and eventually an ambassador. I wanted to work for the United Nations or the United States Foreign Service, but I found it difficult to find a job that I liked, so I decided to go back to school for a second degree in economics. I didn't really know what I was doing with my life at the time, so if I wasn't doing YouTube currently, I probably would be doing one of two things. One, I'd just still be in school studying economics, or two, I would have gotten a job with my international relations degree and been a foreign service worker somewhere in Eastern Europe or Africa, most likely. Question 16. What's the biggest mistake that you've ever made in a video? I cringe most of all at how I used to pronounce certain British cities before I decided to research proper pronunciation before recording my audio. Most cringe-worthy of all include the cities of Leicester and Glasgow, which in previous videos I pronounced as Leicester and Glasgow. I also took the word Maori and butchered it to Maori in another video. But the best thing to do after making mistakes is to not take them personally, learn from them, and just move on. Question 17. Do you drive a Toyota Corolla? I drive a Toyota Yaris, and I guess you could say I'm a huge Toyota fanboy. Toyota has never sponsored one of my videos. I just genuinely like their cars because they're built like reliable tanks. Also, the Corolla is the most sold vehicle ever in history, so I thought that it was a good unit of measurement that people can easily understand and visualize. Question 18. What's your least favorite video that you've ever made? My least favorite video that I ever made was probably the one with the most glaring mistake. It was a video where I explained the Wars of the Roses and how it was similar to the story in Game of Thrones. It took a lot of time, but was poorly made, had terrible audio, was frustrating and time-consuming to research, and had terrible pronunciation mistakes. All around, it was a terrible video, which is why my best to respond to additional questions down in the comments, and I'll make sure to do new random Q&A videos like this one in the future as well. Thank you again to everyone for supporting me and my channel, and thank you to everyone who has ever subscribed or watched any of my videos. This past year has been an incredible and life-changing experience thanks to all of you guys, and I couldn't be more grateful. This episode of Real Life Lore is brought to you by Anker Soundport Portable Speaker Series. Click the link in the description for more information. Think for a moment about how loud the loudest sound that you've ever heard in your life was. If you are hearing my voice right now after experiencing an incident like that, then it was nowhere near the loudest sound that has ever happened. Humans at various points in history have heard sounds so loud from a source that they heard them from thousands of kilometers away from their actual origin. But before I can explain what the loudest sound was and how incredible it is, I first need to explain how sound is measured in terms of loudness in the first place. This image here is a sound wave. For the purpose of this video, all you need to know about really is the amplitude of the wave, because it's the amplitude that determines how loud a sound appears to be to humans. The decibel scale is what's used to measure the loudness of a sound, and it's important to note that the scale is logarithmic. This means that 10 decibels is 10 times more powerful than 0 decibels, and 20 decibels is 10 times more powerful than 10 decibels, but 100 times more powerful than 0 decibels. With all of that in mind, let's start building our way up to the loudest sound in history by beginning at 10 decibels, which is about how loud standard human breathing is and is barely audible to the average human. 10 times more powerful than this at 20 decibels is the rustling of leaves in the wind, and then 10 times more powerful than that at 30 decibels is a whisper. We're still in pretty quiet territory, so moving higher up to 44 decibels is the average ambient noise that's present in a library. A little bit higher than that at 50 decibels is the noise of a normal conversation in your home, and 10 times more powerful than that at 60 decibels is the noise of a normal conversation in a restaurant. 70 decibels is about the noise that a vacuum cleaner produces, and it's a good comparison for all the noises that are coming up next. Twice as loud as that at 80 decibels is the noise created by a garbage disposal, and 4 times as loud as a vacuum cleaner at 90 decibels is the noise that you would hear from a motorcycle engine if you were 7.5 meters away from it. 100 decibels would be 8 times louder than a vacuum cleaner and is roughly the noise produced by operating a jackhammer. Twice as loud as that, though, at 110 decibels is the average threshold that humans begin to experience pain at, and 108 to 114 decibels is the average noise produced at a rock concert. My friends over at Airplane Mode created a video about the value of music produced at concerts like this, so make sure to check out their video next in the description. A chainsaw produces a noise of 120 decibels, which is 32 times louder than the vacuum cleaner is. A shotgun firing right next to you is about 130 decibels, and about the loudest noise that you'll probably ever likely hear in your life is a passenger jet taking off if you were standing 25 meters away from it, which would be around 150 decibels. This is also the level of sound that can immediately rupture your eardrums instantly if you're ever exposed to it. But the loudest sound ever heard by humans that we've been building up to this entire time was unbelievably more loud than this. In the spring of 1883, the volcanic island of Krakatoa in modern-day Indonesia exploded with a force of 200 megatons, a force so powerful it obliterated the entire island. I've talked about this eruption before in a previous video, but I didn't spend much time talking about the noise that it generated. Any sound over 194 decibels begins to distort into more of a shock wave from an explosion rather than an actual sound wave. But the Krakatoa eruption generated an estimated 310 decibels at the epicenter of the explosion. This force was so loud that sailors located 64 kilometers away from the blast had their eardrums ruptured. The noise was even louder though than this may seem at first, because a pressure gauge located 161 kilometers away measured a sound of 180 only rupture your eardrums if you were standing there, but also knock the wind out of your lungs and shatter glass windows on buildings. It's possible you could have actually died from the sound waves impacting and smashing through your body. But even if you didn't, you would be guaranteed to be permanently deaf for life afterwards. If the sound from the blast originated in Central Park in New York City instead, then everybody located inside of this circle would either be dead or permanently deaf for life afterwards. In real life, the volcanic blast was heard as far away as Perth, Australia, whose residents reported hearing what sounded like gunshots. It was also heard on the Indian Ocean island of Rodriguez, 4,800 kilometers away, whose residents reported what they believed to be cannon fire. Imagine if this time you were standing in Central Park and you heard what sounded like a cannon firing somewhere around you, only to find out later that the sound didn't come from near you at all, but rather came all the way from Ireland, and it took a time of nearly 4 hours to reach your ears. The sound wave began to grow less and less audible to humans the farther it traveled until the frequency became too low to be heard. Even though the waves couldn't be heard by humans themselves past a certain range, our instruments detected that the waves generated from the blast circled around the entire planet 3.5 times. So the next time you turn on your speakers with the volume a little too high, at least it won't be loud enough to cause a global catastrophe. But if you want a good speaker to listen to some of these sounds at a more reasonable level, then why not check out the Anker Soundport Boost? You can listen to me or any of your other favorite channels talk for up to 12 hours using this, which is about how long it took the sound wave from the Krakatoa blast to arrive in San Diego. You could have ridden this wave for 12 hours, listened to 250 different songs, and since the speaker is water resistant, it would have lasted you for your entire journey. It features dual drivers and twin subwoofers that delivers 20 watts of high-quality audio. This means it can fill an entire room with sound, which is great for everything from podcasts to parties. Its small, minimalist design means that you can leave it on your desk or take it with you on the go, and you can even power external devices with a USB port packing Anker's trademarked battery technology. Soundport Boost comes with an 18-month warranty and 66 feet of Bluetooth range, so check out the link in the description to learn more about Anker's Soundport Boost. If you enjoyed the video you just watched, then I hope that you'll subscribe to our channel by clicking here. If you'd like to support the channel directly and receive some cool rewards, then check out my Patreon by clicking here. And I'll see you again soon on Friday for another new real-life lore video. This real-life lore video is sponsored by the upcoming film, An Inconvenient Sequel. You've probably heard news at some point in your life that the Earth is warming, and as a result, the Arctic ice is melting. There is no debate that Earth is warming up. The planet's average temperature has increased 1.1 degrees Celsius since 1880, and 16 out of 17 of the hottest years ever on record have been since 2001. NASA estimates there is a 95% probability that this current warming is a direct result of human activity since the mid-20th century, and 97 out of 100 actively publishing climate scientists agree that human activity is extremely likely to blame. As a result of this, ice around the world is melting and raising the planet's sea levels. The oceans already rose by 6 centimeters during the course of the 19th century, but they rose by 19 centimeters during the 20th century, over 3 times faster than they rose during the previous century. NOAA estimates that global sea levels could rise by up to 2.5 meters by the year 2100, which would have devastating consequences. If this happens, entire island countries like Maldives, Marshall Islands, Kiribati, and Tuvalu will be submerged beneath the ocean and cease to exist. Their entire populations will have to be transplanted somewhere else, and this will create a situation in which hundreds of thousands of stateless people will have to find a new home. 150 million total climate refugees from around the world may exist by 2050, and by 2100 that number could rise up to 2 billion people, 18% of the global population at that time. But in an even worse case scenario than this, however, what would happen if all the ice on Earth melted? If all the ice on Antarctica, Greenland, and the world's glaciers melted into the ocean, it would raise global sea levels by an incredible 68.3 meters. Such a catastrophe would take 5,000 years at the current rate of ice melting to happen, but it would severely size to completely swallow Sacramento. The Gulf of California would expand so far north that Palm Springs would become a coastal city, while on the Atlantic coast, the ocean would expand to swallow the cities of Corpus Christi, Houston, New Orleans, the entire state of Florida, as well as the entire state of Delaware, almost all of Long Island, and the cities of New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., and Boston. South America would also be severely flooded with two new inland seas existing on the continent, and the cities of Buenos Aires, Montevideo, and Rio de Janeiro would all be underwater. Europe would be one of the most devastating areas in the world. The entire country of the Netherlands would be underwater, and so would nearly all of Denmark and half of Belgium. The British Isles would become more of an archipelago, and London would be totally buried beneath the sea. Northern Germany would also be entirely underwater, including the city of Berlin, and Venice in Italy would have long since been reclaimed by the Adriatic Sea. Istanbul would also be underwater, the Crimean Peninsula would become the Crimean Island, and the Black and Caspian Seas would be connected with one another, which would mean that Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and Azerbaijan would no longer be landlocked countries. Africa would perhaps be the least severely affected continent, but Egypt would be severely damaged by having both Alexandria and Cairo going underwater. The Persian Gulf, meanwhile, would swallow the entire countries of Qatar and Bahrain, and the city of Baghdad. India and Pakistan would be badly damaged, but the entire country of Bangladesh would cease to exist in this catastrophe. Hundreds of millions of people would be underwater in China, including Beijing and Shanghai, in addition to the cities of Seoul, Pyongyang, and Tokyo. Australia would be home to a new inland sea, and finally Antarctica would become more of an archipelago. But unlike the Antarctica of today, this Antarctica would likely be habitable and easily colonizable by future humans. So what can we do to prevent this nightmare future from happening? Reducing humanity's usage of fossil fuels is perhaps the best way at mitigating our warming climate. These following countries produce at least 75% of their power from renewable energy resources like solar, wind, and hydropower. Global investments in renewable energy rose by 57% between 2008 and 2015. The European Union alone more than doubled its renewable energy production between 2000 and 2013, and recently 195 different countries signed the Paris Climate Accord, in which they all agreed to cooperate in combating global warming. While the stakes have never been higher, we are close to seeing a true energy revolution. If you want to learn more about climate change and want to take action yourself, then I strongly encourage you to go watch the upcoming film, An Inconvenient Sequel. Watching the film is taking action, and it goes into far more depth than I ever could in a short YouTube video. The film will be released in New York and Los Angeles on July 28th, and will be released nationwide on August 4th. Please go to the description below for more details. Be inconvenient.
Watch the water splash off the city. This is global warming.
I feel so scared. Sorry.
Despair can be paralyzing, but this to me is the most exciting new development. We're seeing a tremendous amount of positive change. The basis is there, but it's still not enough.
If you enjoyed what you just watched, then I hope that you'll subscribe to my channel for future videos by clicking here. You can visit my Patreon if you'd like to support my channel directly and receive some cool rewards. I hope to see you on next Friday for another new real-life lore video then. Over 150 years ago, the United States fought the bloodiest war in her history against herself. As much as 3% of the population of the country died fighting that war. One of the two sides that fought it was the Confederate States of America. The Confederacy lost the war and was vanquished from history. But what if today, for whatever reason, the Confederacy re-emerged as an independent country again? What would the Confederacy of today actually look like? To begin with, the same 11 states that were part of the old Confederacy would be part of this new one as well. Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia. The Confederate population of today would be over 104 million people, which is fascinating when you consider that the population of the Confederacy in 1861 was just over 9 million people, over 11 times less than it would be today. Slavery was, of course, a central element of the old Confederacy. 39% of the population in 1861 were slaves, which means that the free population was really only a little over 5.5 million people. Slavery like this in the modern world, though, is absolutely unthinkable and completely unnecessary, as a modern confederacy would be much more industrialized and urbanized than its past self was. The most powerful and influential Confederate state in 1861 was Virginia, which was home to the capital city of Richmond, located just 155 kilometers away from Washington, D.C. The most populous city back then was New Orleans, with a population of only 169,000 people. The least influential states then were Florida, home to 140,000 people, which, interestingly, was less than the population of New Orleans was at the time, and Texas, which was home to a population of just 604,000 people. The Confederacy of today, however, would be wildly different. Virginia would be only the 5th most populous state, while Texas and Florida would be the most populous and most powerful states. Texas especially would dominate the modern Confederacy. Houston would be the largest city in the country instead of New Orleans, and 6 out of 10 of the largest cities in the country would all be located inside of Texas, while the others would be scattered around a few other states. The capital city would likely become either Austin or Tallahassee in Florida, owing to the power of those states inside of the country. If the Confederacy ever came back into existence, however, it would almost certainly be an immediate conflict with the remainder of the United States. So how would the two sides look compared with one another? The Confederate population, while higher than it was in 1861, would still have less than half the population of the rest of the United States at over 217 million people. The Confederate GDP would be $5.079 trillion US, the third highest in the world, but the remaining United States would still have an economy over twice as large at $13.49 trillion US, making the United States still, after losing all the Confederate territory, the world's most powerful economy. The military budget of the Confederacy would also be the third highest in the world at $161.2 billion US, but it would be no match for the remaining United States military's budget, which would dwarf it at $450 billion US. The actual military sizes, however, would be much more comparable than they were in 1861. Assuming that all of the soldiers of each state returned home and didn't defect, the Confederacy would start with a military size of 1,153,000 soldiers, while the remaining United States would have a military size of 1,211,000 soldiers, just slightly larger than the Confederates. In 1861, however, the odds were much more in favor of the Union, who had 698,000 soldiers at the peak of the war, compared to only 360,000 Confederate soldiers then. With all things being considered, though, a modern Confederacy would be a major global power with the third largest economy and third most powerful military. Just like it was in 1861, however, the Confederacy would be significantly weaker than the remaining United States. The two sides would have a similar-sized military to start off with, but the Union could draft significantly more soldiers later in the war since it would have more than double the population of the Confederacy. The Union Army would also be much better equipped owing to a drastically larger budget and economy than the Confederacy would have, which means that in the event of another civil war, the Union would once again have more advantages and be the likely winner of any conflict. Please leave your comments below about how you think this scenario would play out if it were to actually ever happen. This video was voted on for me to make this month by my patrons over at the Real Life Lore Patreon. If you'd like to take part in this community and vote on future videos, then please check it out by clicking here or following the link in the description. You can subscribe to my channel by clicking here to stay updated for future videos. This is a video by Real Life Lore, made possible by Skillshare, home to over 16,000 classes that can teach you a new life skill. The first 500 people to sign up using the link in the description will get a 2-month free trial. In a previous video I made, I discussed several events that will happen in our world and our universe over the course of the next billion years. But time will go on for much, much longer than just 1 billion years. So what will happen after a billion years has passed from today? By the time a billion years has passed from today, will already be unrecognizable. Due to the sun's increasing luminosity, the average surface temperature will have increased to 47 degrees Celsius. The oceans will have already evaporated away, and liquid water will only exist at the poles, which will become the final bastions of life on our planet. But time will continue onwards. In 1.5 billion years, the sun's luminosity will have caused its habitable zone to move outwards further into the solar system. The surface temperature of Mars during these times will resemble the Earth during the last ice age, and would make a good home for any future advanced civilizations. In 2.3 billion years from now, the outer liquid core of Earth will freeze, which means that Earth will lose its magnetic field forever. By 2.8 billion years, Earth's average surface temperature will have dramatically increased to 149 degrees Celsius, which means that even simple single-celled organisms on the planet will have completely died out. For the first time in billions of years, Earth will be devoid of any life. In 3.3 billion years, there is a 1% chance that Mercury's orbit will become unstable, which will cause it to collide with Venus, obliterating both planets and throwing the inner solar system into chaos. In 3.5 billion years, the sun's luminosity will have increased by 40% of its present value. Earth's surface temperature will have skyrocketed to roughly 1,330 degrees Celsius, which is hot enough to melt rocks. Earth at this point in time will very closely resemble Venus during our own time, and in 4 billion years from now, our entire galaxy will change dramatically. The Andromeda Galaxy, which is even bigger than our own galaxy, is currently on a 4 billion year long collision course with us. When they finally collide, our two galaxies will begin the process of merging together to form one united galaxy, and the night sky on any planet located inside of them will look far more dramatic than anything we see in our own night sky of the present. In 5 billion years, the sun will have exhausted its supply of hydrogen and will begin to evolve into its red giant phase. Much later, at 7.59 billion years from now, the sun will have expanded dramatically to 256 times its current size, and the moon may fall apart and rain down onto the Earth's molten surface. By 7.9 billion years from now, Mercury and Venus, and most likely Earth, will be totally swallowed by the sun and cease to exist. During these times, however, it is hypothesized that a moon of Saturn named Titan could achieve surface temperatures warm enough to support life, which means that as the sun grows larger, civilization on Earth could flee deeper into the solar system to escape the heat. But after 8 billion years, the sun will have finally become a white dwarf star equal to 54% of its current mass. Temperatures inside of the solar system will plummet afterwards, and all still existing life will likely die. The number of years in the future will now begin to dramatically increase, and will start by going 100 billion years into the future. By this point, the expansion of the universe will have pushed everything outside of our small local group of galaxies far enough away that nobody here will be able to observe them anymore. Any intelligent beings that may exist here at this point will believe that they are at the center of the universe in a small bastion of light, surrounded by infinite darkness in every direction. We know this to not be true, but in the future, nobody will have any way of proving this to be incorrect, which will likely have a profound impact on future philosophy and culture. In 450 billion years, the 47 different galaxies of the local group will have further coalesced together into a single gigantic galaxy, and that feeling of loneliness will be even further amplified. All the way until 4 trillion years from now, the closest star to Earth, named Proxima Centauri b, will have survived. But afterwards, this ancient star will finally die, just as the sun did trillions of years before it. Finally, 12 trillion years from now, the last star that exists today alongside you watching this video will have died out. The universe will be full of new stars born after our present age, but even these will not last forever. 120 trillion years from now is when galaxy which today is home to over 100 billion different stars. But even these final stars will eventually die, and the universe will turn dark forever afterwards. 120 trillion years, though, is a longer time than any of us can really comprehend. So on the bright side, humanity has plenty of time to enjoy the majesty of our universe before the lights finally turn off. I've heard from a lot of people before how I create these videos and what it takes to create them. To be entirely honest, I never went to school for graphic design, and I taught myself how to use Adobe After Effects, Premiere, and Photoshop entirely by watching online tutorial videos. You truly can teach yourself anything you want to do online today, and Skillshare is a perfect place for doing that with professional and easy to understand. Hello everybody. Over the past year, I've had the greatest time of my life reading, researching, writing, and editing over 50 videos that I've posted to this channel. But during that same amount of time, I've been doing a lot of writing that most of you so far are probably unaware about. For every one video that gets posted to this channel, I've probably written about one or two other topics that I decided to throw out for any number of reasons. Some topics are just way too long and in-depth for me to just spend 7 or 8 minutes talking about on YouTube, while others just don't really work well in an animated video format. I've written a little over 40,000 words worth of these ideas that never quite made it into actual videos, and decided to turn them into a book instead. This book is the product of a year's worth of ideas that YouTube couldn't handle, but it's nonetheless full of topics that I truly loved to write about. These are almost entirely brand new subjects that I have never made a video about, like how far away can you possibly get from the ocean? What if the German Empire reunited today in the 21st century? More really weird borders, a complete tutorial on creating your own country, and a lot of other weird and useless stuff. If that sounds like the sort of thing that you'd be interested in reading about, you can pre-order it right now by going to barnesandnoble.com, Amazon.com, or a few other places. The links are all in the description of this video.
Yes, you get the calendar, this remember.
But the more people who pre-order it now, the more likely that the Switzerland has long been a little paranoid about a foreign invasion, and it's not without good reason. In the First World War, Germany invaded neutral Belgium in order to attack France in a more vulnerable position. And in the Second World War, Switzerland found herself in 1940 to be completely surrounded by Axis-occupied territory and faced an imminent threat of invasion from Nazi Germany. The invasion never happened, but fears persisted into the Cold War of a potential Soviet invasion, and that attitude has never fully gone away. Switzerland's plan for dealing with a potential invasion from Italy was called the National Redoubt, and it was essentially intended to make any possible enemy look at the map, look at Switzerland, and think to themselves, no thanks, I'll take over something a little easier instead. The first reason why is Switzerland continues to have mandatory male conscription, meaning that all men have to serve in the military for 170 days and receive basic training. They enter into the reserves afterwards and keep their rifles at their home, and although many get exemptions, Switzerland has the ability to mobilize over 200,000 soldiers within 72 hours of an emergency being declared. In addition, every road, bridge, tunnel, and railroad in the country has been designed in a way that they can be remotely blown up to deny a possible invader from ever using them. There are over 3,000 of these points that can be blown up inside of the country, including entire mountainsides that can be detonated to cause a landslide to block off entire roads. In addition to all of this, the modern Swiss military strategy has always been to abandon the plateau in the city centers and retreat almost the entire military into the Alpine region. Here, high in the mountains, the Swiss have built over 26,000 bunkers and fortified positions ranging from anti-tank guns, anti-air guns, or machine gun nests. They are camouflaged like this anti-tank gun that looks like a rock, or this barn that's actually a machine gun nest on the left and an anti-tank gun on the right, and both of these are connected by a tunnel underground. There are camouflage positions like these all over the Alpine region of Switzerland, which means that the entire country is basically one big booby trap, an impregnable castle in the center of Europe. This is why Switzerland has been able to remain neutral throughout some of the most difficult times in European history. But many now question the importance of this defensive and neutral mindset. Germany, Austria, Italy, and France are today all European Union member states and have no militaristic intentions on conquering Switzerland. The National Redoubt has seen many of its fortresses and bunkers turned into museums in the last few years, and Switzerland is planning on downsizing its military from around 200,000 to only 80,000 by the year 2020. But nonetheless, one place that Switzerland will always be is the safest place in the world to possibly be at in the event of a global nuclear war. This is because Switzerland is the only country in the world to have enough nuclear fallout shelters to house their entire population. In fact, Switzerland has enough fallout shelters to house 114% of their population, meaning that even in the event of a large refugee influx, the country would still have enough shelters to fit everybody inside of them. All residential buildings inside of the country built after 1978 are mandated by law to contain a nuclear shelter capable of surviving a 12-megaton blast from a distance of 700 meters away. As of 2006, there are over 8.6 million fallout shelters located throughout the country, ranging in sizes like this in a normal house, up to gigantic public shelters built inside of tunnels that can house over 2,000 people for over 4 months. In the event of a nuclear attack on Switzerland, it is possible that the entire population of the country could retreat to their bunkers and continue fighting off any invader after the bombs have exploded. Not even nuclear weapons can conquer the fortress of Switzerland, and it has been said before that in the event of a global nuclear war, the only survivors would be the heads of state of a few countries, cockroaches, and 8.4 million Swiss citizens. If a nuclear war ever does happen, the Swiss have enough bunkers for not only them, but a few friends to survive it all through with. So remember this when it may become important later. Switzerland is likely the safest place you could possibly be during the event of a nuclear war or World War III. Before you start making plans to visit, though, it would be nice to let other people know about what you just learned, possibly by creating a domain with an accurate name like Switzerland.party. Hover makes it incredibly easy to buy lots of different domains with fun extensions like .party or .cool. But even better, even if you don't need a domain name, set up a custom email account instead with the Switzerland.party.
quando se me acaba a membresia que é em matar o concentrado.
Other than that, please make sure to subscribe to my channel to stay updated with future videos by clicking here. You can visit my Patreon here if you'd like to directly support the channel, and I hope to see you next Friday for another brand new video then. This is a video by Real Life Lore, made possible by Blinkist. Read the key insights of over 2,000 nonfiction books and save 20% off your new subscription by clicking the link in the description. 12,000 years ago in the hills of modern-day Turkey, our ancient ancestors built what is to our knowledge the oldest temple in the world. It has always been a human desire to see how far up into the sky their creations can reach. Ancient humans used to gaze at the night sky and dream about reaching the stars with their buildings. It is only natural for humanity to push further than ever before and build taller and taller than anybody before them. But surely there must be a limit to how tall we can eventually build something, right? What is actually the tallest thing that we could theoretically ever build? To begin with a sense of scale, this is a standard height for a one-story family home, about 4.5 meters tall above the ground. Moving up from there at 128 meters high is the tallest statue in the world, a statue so tall that if you jumped from the top of its head, it would take you 5.5 seconds before hitting the ground. Just a bit higher at 139 meters is the tallest roller coaster in the world, but that's not quite as high up as the Great Pyramid of Giza, which was built a very long time ago in 2570 BC. Once completed, it was by far the tallest thing that we humans had ever built, and it maintained that record for an unbelievable 3,881 years, until it was finally beaten in the year 1311 in England. The Lincoln Cathedral reached a soaring height of 160 meters into the sky, and that remained the tallest thing that humans had ever achieved until kind of recently in 1884, when the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. finally surpassed its height at 169 meters. The tallest Ferris wheel in the world currently is roughly the same height as this monument, so the monument clearly didn't remain the tallest structure for very long. The Eiffel Tower surpassed it quickly and was 301 meters high above the ground, which absolutely dwarfed everything that humans had ever built before it. The Eiffel Tower kind of opened up Pandora's box though in terms of how tall we could possibly build something. With the advent of wrought iron and steel, the height of our structures could get much greater. The Chrysler Building at 319 meters tall finally unseated the Eiffel Tower after 41 years of holding the record. But the very next year after preventing us from doing that right now? In theory, there really isn't a limit to how tall we can build something at all, so long as we kept expanding the base of the structure to support the added weight on the top. Since the Earth is spherical, there obviously is a limit to how much we can expand the base of the structure by. So given our current technology and resources, the tallest thing we could possibly build right now is likely the Exceed 4000, the tallest structure ever fully envisioned with completed blueprints. It would soar to an insane height of 4 kilometers into the sky, which would make the Burj Khalifa look puny in comparison, and it would be even taller than Mount Fuji is in Japan. It would even reach about 45% as high as Mount Everest, or 2,748 Toyota Corollas stacked on top of each other. The base of the tower would have to be 6 kilometers across in order to support the enormous weight on the top. It would basically be a metal mountain capable of housing over 1 million people inside of it, and it would be so gargantuan that it would likely disrupt weather patterns around wherever it is built. The cost of building such a titanic structure, however, is perhaps as equal a ludicrous thought. Estimates range anywhere from $479 billion on the lower end up to $1.4 trillion on the higher end, which is higher than the entire GDP of Russia. The Exceed 4000 is a true testament to possibility, and if we decided to build it today, there's nothing that could stop us from finishing it tomorrow. In the future, it may become possible to build even more outrageous structures like a space elevator 100,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface. But since that currently isn't possible, I decided to leave it out of this video until now. There doesn't exist a material that we can produce enough of that is both strong and light enough to build a space elevator. But if our technology advances enough in the future, it is theoretically possible to build, which makes this probably the tallest thing that could ever be built on Earth in humanity's future. For some perspective, the International Space Station only orbits around the Earth this far away from the surface, while the 100,000 kilometer space elevator would stretch all the way out to here. Due to the Earth's rotation, the top of this elevator would be moving incredibly fast relative to the surface. This means that people on board would experience a modest amount of time dilation, similar to what astronauts on board the International Space Station experience today. Astronaut Scott Kelly, for example, spent an entire year aboard the space station, and as a result of time dilation, he returned back to Earth 0.01 seconds younger than his identical twin brother. It may not seem like much, but Scott Kelly in effect time traveled a very small amount due to the speed that he was traveling at. I learned a lot about time travel and how it could be possible just yesterday in a few spare minutes by listening to Blinkist, a new digital learning app that distills the key insights behind great non-fiction books including Time Travel, A History by James Gleick. If you want a sneak peek at an upcoming video of mine dedicated to time travel and would like to learn more about the subject, then you should definitely check this book out on Blinkist next. They offer an easy way to learn about new topics fast, and if you enjoy listening to my videos, I guarantee you'll also enjoy listening to similar topics in more depth over at Blinkist. New subscribers to Blinkist can get 20% off a full year subscription by following the link below. Or you can try Blinkist for free for 24 hours first by going to Blinkist.com/real-life-lore. You were born curious, so continue learning more by giving Blinkist a shot. Other than that, if you enjoyed this video, I hope that you'll consider subscribing to my channel by clicking here. If you'd like to support the channel directly, you can visit my Patreon, and I look forward to seeing you again for another brand new video next Friday. sense that they're all connected by road. Right? Wrong. Because I lied. It's impossible to cross from Africa to Asia fully on land because of this, the Suez Canal. This is the canal that makes the trip from Europe to Asia by boat, this instead of this. The only physical connection between the two continents is therefore the 3 bridges spanning the canal. But the road system is still contiguous, so it still counts as one big road system. Speaking of big things, the 6th largest country in the world and the 3rd smallest continent, Australia, has its own major road system. But there's not much more to say about it other than if you go a little bit this way, you get to America. Both of them. Much like Africa and Asia, the Americas technically are not connected because of a man-made canal, the Panama Canal. But that's not a problem because there are multiple bridges spanning the narrow waterway. The problem is this, the Darien Gap. Not a single road crosses this desolate swampland spanning over the Panama-Colombia border. The area is overrun with paramilitary forces and drug lords. There's just not enough demand to make braving the marshy and dangerous area to build a road worth it. So that's why North America and South America have 2 completely separate, unconnected road systems.
So to recap, these 4 areas all have pre-existing road networks, but none of them connect with one another. So how can we fix that to live in a world where you can drive from New York to London and back again?
Let's imagine that this global highway would originate in Cape Town, South Africa, and end in Punta Arenas in Chile, the southernmost city in the world with a population over 100,000 people. The current highway system from Cape Town to Kinshasa is fine and would take you 51 hours to complete the whole drive. But once in Kinshasa, our first problem arises. There is currently no bridge over the Congo River between Kinshasa and Brazzaville, so the only current way across is by a ferry.
In order for our global highway to work, we need to build a bridge across, which would cost around $444 million. Assuming that it's built, the drive from Brazzaville to Adalia in Morocco can continue just fine with existing highways. The total driving time across all of Africa so far stands at 7 days and 6 hours. But here we encounter one of the largest problems to our global highway, the Mediterranean Sea. Luckily, at this point, though, the sea separates Morocco from Spain by only 14 kilometers. But it's not the length that's the problem, it's the depth of the water, which is up to 900 meters deep at some parts. It would be a gigantic engineering challenge to construct, and the estimated cost is somewhere around $24 billion. But let's assume that it's built and you're now across from Africa in the town of Algeciras in Spain. You can now drive all the way from this town to the other side of Eurasia in Magadan, Russia on currently existing highways. And that drive alone would take 7 days and 11 hours. When combined with your trip from Cape Town, the total drive from there to Magadan would take 14 days and 17 hours to complete. In order to connect more people on the global highway, UK citizens could transport their vehicles through the channel and begin their journey on French highways on the way to Magadan. If you live in Australia, New Zealand, or Indonesia, I'm sorry, but it's probably not possible to build a bridge connecting you guys to the system with our current technology. The distances that Australia and New Zealand are from everything else means that any bridge built would have to be at least 165 kilometers over open ocean, which is not very feasible. So basically, if the rest of the system is built, if you were living just about anywhere in Eurasia, you would be able to drive to Magadan. But getting from there to North America is perhaps the greatest challenge that the system faces. This is a map of the Russian highway system, and as you notice, this entire area here is full of nothing. Over 2,000 kilometers of brand new highways would have to be built through this vast and freezing land to connect to the small village of Ulan near the Bering Strait. From here, mainland Alaska is only 82 kilometers away, but a bridge doesn't have to be built that long alone because of these. The Diomede Islands, luckily in the center between Alaska and Russia. Because of them, you only need to build 3 separate smaller bridges instead of one long one. And the water depth is actually quite shallow at only 55 meters deep. But still, due to the freezing temperatures here, the challenge of building it would be enormous. And the bridge would likely cost an insane $105 billion to complete. And then there's the problem that the closest town in Alaska is 160 kilometers away from where the bridge would be constructed at. So another highway would have to be built out to there. But this town is even further separated from the rest of the road system in Alaska, which means that even more highways would have to be built entirely from scratch to connect all the way to Fairbanks. existing road system ends here at the aforementioned Darien Gap. So if the area could become a little more safe and a highway was built across it in the future, you could drive even further all the way down to Punta Arenas in Chile, the southernmost major city in the world. To recap all of this one more time, these areas would have to see some major construction projects to build the global highway system. The longest route would be from Cape Town to Punta Arenas, and it would be over 52,000 kilometers long, take you over 28 days of driving time, and the entire system would likely cost at least $233 billion to build. That's a little over 1% of the United States' GDP, or about 38% of what the United States military spends in one full year. That may not seem like very much until you remember, you could always just fly from Cape Town to Punta Arenas for about $2,000, and it would only take you about 27 hours instead of 675 hours. So this video was done in a collaboration with the new channel Half as Interesting. So if you'd like to know more about the longest possible drivable route in the world today, then please go ahead and check out this video next. If you enjoyed what you just watched, then I hope that you'll subscribe to my channel by clicking here. If you'd like to directly support my channel, you can visit my Patreon by clicking here, and I hope to see you again next Friday for another brand new video then.
Agora você não precisa mais escolher.
This video was made possible by Skillshare. The first 500 people to sign up using the link in the description can learn new skills for free for 2 months. So here's the odd question. What's the biggest possible explosion that humanity could create using our current technology? Let's assume that for whatever reason, every country in the world decided to work together and contribute all of their resources to producing this enormous explosion. If that's the case, then what really is the biggest explosion possible? For a little context of what's about to come, it's important to realize the scale of the largest explosions humanity has created so far. The biggest of these explosions ever, before the invention of nuclear bombs, was the Halifax explosion. An accident that occurred when a French munitions ship collided with another ship that caused it to explode in the harbor of Halifax, Canada. The resulting explosion was equal to 2.9 kilotons of TNT, which obliterated everything within an 800-meter radius of the blast and shattered nearly every window in the city. But humans have created an even larger non-nuclear explosion since then, when the United States conducted a test called Minor Scale back in 1985. It was an experiment intended to simulate a nuclear bomb using only conventional explosives, and it achieved an explosion of 4.2 kilotons of TNT. Placed over New York City, the destructive power of such a device appears more obvious, but the advent of nuclear weapons changed everything forever. I already made a video detailing the enormous destructive power of individual nuclear weapons and ended that video by
approximately 10 gigatons. This single hypothetical bomb would be nearly 7 times as powerful as all 15,000 currently existing nuclear weapons combined. Such a ridiculous explosion would be capable of destroying the entire country of France almost instantaneously, or all of Great Britain and Ireland. The bomb was nicknamed the Backyard Bomb because of the fact that you could detonate it anywhere on the Earth and it would still be capable of harming your enemy by dumping massive fallout radiation across the entire planet. Such a device is likely the largest possible explosion that humans could create with our modern technology. Although in the future, it may become possible to create more exotic devices like an antimatter bomb. 1 single gram of antimatter could produce an explosion equal to 43 kilotons. But considering that the current cost of producing even 1/millionth of a gram of this stuff is $60 billion, that won't be possible anytime soon. If you can somehow come up with the $60 billion required to create 1 gram of antimatter, then let me know in the comments. Many of you frequently ask me in the comments what software I use to animate these videos with and how I learned to do it. In this video, I used a mixture of Adobe After Effects, Audition, Illustrator, and Premiere Pro. For Unlimited, this real-life lore video is made possible by Brilliant. Get help learning calculus, algebra, gravitational physics, and more for 20% off over at brilliant.org/real-life-lore. So this is the Mediterranean Sea, which is surrounded by 21 different countries. But what would happen to these 21 countries and the rest of the world if we somehow managed to drain all of the water out of it? It's not as far-fetched of an idea as you may think it is at first. Back in the 1920s, a man named Herman Sorgel had a very similar idea that helps to illustrate how this may be possible. His idea was called the Atlantropa Project, and it's basically what engineers create whenever they've had a bit too much whiskey to drink. The plan took into consideration that the Mediterranean Sea is naturally evaporative, which means that more water evaporates out of the sea than flows into it by rivers and streams. The difference is made up by salt water that flows into the sea through the Strait of Gibraltar, which means that in theory, if you could block off this water flow, you could begin to drain the water out of the entire rest of the sea. Sorgel intended to build a colossal dam here for that exact purpose, along with another dam here between Sicily and Tunisia to divide the Mediterranean into 2 separate halves, and a third dam here to block off the water from the Black Sea from getting through. The plan involved lowering the water levels by 100 meters on the western side of the Mediterranean and by 200 meters on the eastern side. This would have drained about 1/5 of the entire Mediterranean Sea, which means that it would have created about 576,000 square kilometers of new land, an area roughly the size of Spain and Ireland combined. The continents of Europe and Africa would be directly connected, and this new continent was intended to be called Atlantropa. The new land around the Mediterranean was intended to be colonized by new European settlers. The combined dams could probably have provided enough clean hydroelectric power for all of Europe, and the project would have employed hundreds of thousands of people for the 100 years that it was planned the project would last for. So, why wasn't it ever built? Well, for starters, the Mediterranean Sea is salty, which means that all that freshly exposed land would be salt flats and useless for any agriculture. It was also calculated by some architects that there wasn't enough concrete in the entire world to build the dam at Gibraltar anyway, let alone the other 2 dams that were part of the project. It would have also required an enormous amount of international cooperation, and the 21 Mediterranean coast countries that I mentioned previously all would have coastal cities that would be very upset that they were no longer on the coast. Even if it was somehow built, one well-placed nuclear bomb on the Gibraltar Dam would cause a biblical-style flood that would destroy the entire project instantly and ruin the lives of millions of people. In addition, the planners didn't take into consideration at all how the project may have impacted weather patterns across Europe and Africa. But let's get back to what the title of this video is all about. What if the dam at Gibraltar was actually somehow built and we decided to drain out all of the water in the Mediterranean Sea? What would happen next? Well, for starters, the entire area that once made up the sea would likely become a vast desert with the hottest temperatures anywhere on Earth. Enormous canyons would plunge as deep as 5,000 meters below sea level, and the temperature down here could approach an unbearable 80 degrees Celsius. For comparison, the hottest temperature ever
went so far on the Earth's surface was 54 degrees Celsius in weight. In addition, even though the water in the Mediterranean would be gone, the salt that used to be in the water would remain on the land in thick built-up layers. All of the newly exposed land would be a salty, dry, and fiercely hot desert that would be incredibly hostile to any form of life or settlement. It could almost be seen as an extension of the Sahara Desert in Africa, but the desert wouldn't just end here. An enormous amount of southern Europe and Turkey would rapidly become a desert as well, with Portugal, Spain, France, Italy, Albania, Greece, and Turkey being the most severely affected. The entire Balkan and Alpine regions would see significantly less rainfall as a result too, which means that agriculture across most of Europe would be severely damaged, but the rest of the world would be severely impacted as well. Because the massive amount of water located inside the Mediterranean would have to go somewhere, it would end up being redistributed into the world's oceans, which would raise sea levels everywhere else by roughly 10 meters from where they are today. This would be catastrophic in an opposite way and lead to cities like New Orleans, Sacramento, Amsterdam, Copenhagen, and Shanghai going completely underwater. Predicting the weather is a very hard business, and predicting how exactly removing an entire body of water as large as the Mediterranean would impact the global climate is nearly impossible, but it certainly wouldn't be good. Needless to say, this entire thing is probably a very bad idea. Figuring out what would happen if we drank the Mediterranean Sea without actually doing it is complicated. There are many different possible scenarios, and I've made several simplifying assumptions in this video to arrive at the answer. If you've watched other videos of mine, then you know that I love figuring out all kinds of absurd scenarios from what the economy of a reunited British Empire would look like today, to how much a supermassive black hole would weigh in units of Toyota Corollas. As much as I love explaining the absurd, I think that everyone should be able to do that, and the best way is to practice it yourself. Brilliant.org is the perfect website to do this on. It's a problem-solving website that teaches you how to think like a scientist by guiding you through problems to solidify your understanding. They take real-life problems like these, dissect the problem into manageable bits, analyze the implications, and present an interesting conclusion. If you visit brilliant.org/real-life-lore or click the link in the description, you can sign up for free and begin learning about all kinds of things. And as a bonus exclusive for real-life lore viewers, the first 200 people will also get 20% off of their annual membership. If you learn anything interesting, then please let me know below in the comments. This real-life lore video is made possible by Storyblocks. Click the link in the description for an exclusive 7-day free trial and download photos, illustrations, vectors, and more for your next video or artistic project. So as most of us are probably aware, predicting the future is a very difficult business to be involved in. Unanticipated events can always change what we thought would happen, but we're still free to make our best educated guesses with the means that are available to us. With that in mind, here are the events that will most likely happen before the year 2050 for you to look forward to happening. Starting out just next year in 2018, 2 new countries may emerge in the form of New Caledonia and Bougainville in the Pacific, as they hold independence referendums from France and Papua New Guinea respectively. The FIFA World Cup will be held in Russia, and NASA will deploy the James Webb Space Telescope, which will be significantly more powerful than the Hubble Space Telescope. In 2019, the United Kingdom will officially leave the European Union, and the FIFA Women's World Cup will be held in France. The next year in 2020 will probably be quite eventful. The Jeddah Tower in Saudi Arabia is scheduled to be completed, which will become the new tallest structure in the world at a full kilometer tall. The Summer Olympics will be held in Tokyo, and Bigelow Aerospace plans on beginning construction of the first ever space hotel that will be able to accommodate 6 very wealthy guests at a time. In 2021, India is expected to launch their first ever manned space mission, and the following year in 2022, China plans on constructing their first very own space station. In addition, the FIFA World Cup will be hosted once again in Qatar, and the Winter Olympics will be hosted in Beijing, China. In 2023, the copyrights of the earliest Mickey Mouse cartoons will expire under current US copyright law, but 2024 will be much more eventful. The company SpaceX ostensibly has plans on launching their first rocket carrying cargo to Mars this
Finally this year, the Fehmarn Belt fixed link will be completed, which will provide a direct rail and highway link between northern Germany and Copenhagen in Denmark. In 2025, the Giant Magellan Telescope is scheduled to be completed. It will be the largest observatory in the world at this point and have 10 times the resolution power of the Hubble Space Telescope. In addition, the UK will have completely phased out all of their coal power plants. The next year, in 2026, will possibly see SpaceX launch the first ever manned mission to Mars if everything goes according to their current schedule. NASA also has plans to send a manned mission to visit an asteroid this year, and construction on the Catalan Cathedral Sagrada Familia will also be finally completed. Construction on this epic church began all the way back in 1882, which means that it will have taken 144 years to finally complete it this year. In 2027, 10 years from the current year if you are watching this in 2017, the SpaceX crew that launched the year previously will finally arrive at their destination, meaning that we might witness the first ever humans to set foot on Mars this year. Also, the full autopsy report on Elvis Presley, which was agreed to be sealed for 50 years following his death, will finally be made publicly available this year. In 2028, the Summer Olympics will be hosted in Los Angeles, California. At near the end of the decade in 2029, the cities of San Francisco and Los Angeles will be connected by a high-speed rail line that can transport people from one to the other in just 2 hours and 20 minutes. But when the 2030s finally arrive, we'll all be in for a very interesting decade. At some point this decade, NASA plans on launching their own manned mission to Mars, so if SpaceX failed to accomplish this in 2027, then NASA will probably land the first humans on the Red Planet sometime around now. China further has plans on launching their own manned mission to the moon sometime during this decade as well, and Russia has plans on landing their own cosmonauts on the moon in the year 2031. Skipping ahead to 2036, however, and we arrive at perhaps the most ambitious upcoming space project called Breakthrough Starshot. Without going into too much details, the plan should be able to send tiny spacecraft to the Alpha Centauri star system, the nearest other star to Earth. A planet inside the system, Proxima Centauri b, is located inside of the habitable zone here and could possibly be home to some form of alien life. When the tiny ships are hopefully launched in 2036, they will arrive in the system 20 to 30 years later and can take detailed photographs of this mysterious planet. In 2037, we may see the first summer where there won't be any ice in the Arctic, and by 2040, France will have completely banned the sale of all gasoline and diesel vehicles in the country. In 2042, the world population will have probably reached 9 billion people, while Americans of European ancestry will become a minority group inside of the United States for the first time. This year will also probably see the advent of the world's first trillionaire as well, and in 2044, the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, including The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, will enter into the public domain. 2045 is the estimated year of the technological singularity according to the famed futurist Ray Kurzweil, meaning that this may be the year where artificial intelligence will surpass human intelligence, which could lead to enormous and unforeseen changes in society. In 2048, the Antarctic Treaty will come up for review, which could lead to mining and oil industries opening up on the continent for the first time. And finally, we will arrive at the year of 2050. By this point, half of the Amazon rainforest will likely be deforested. About 70% of the world population will be living in cities. About half of the global population may not have access to clean drinking water. The average global life expectancy may be 76 years old. There will be super smart artificial intelligences that will be even smarter than humans. Self-driving cars will likely be normal, and a new world of possibly hundreds or even thousands of people will be living and working on Mars. There are things to be both afraid of and excited for in the future, so let's make sure to work as hard as we can in the present to make our future the best one that we can possibly imagine. So this number right here is how much these last few images would have cost if I had bought them from a traditional stock image provider. But thankfully, I get my images and videos from Storyblocks. With a Storyblocks membership, you can... This real-life lore video is made possible by Tab for a Cause. Install their free browser extension by clicking the link in the description to help with hurricane disaster relief across the United States and elsewhere. Hurricanes, cyclones, and typhoons are some of the most destructive natural disasters that occur on our planet. Hurricane Katrina in 2005 caused over $105 billion in damages, and Hurricane Sandy in 2012 caused over $74 billion in damages. The amount of damage caused in North America and the Caribbean by this most recent hurricane season in 2017 will likely be unprecedented. But what if there was a way to destroy a hurricane before it could actually make landfall and cause any damage? Various theories have been proposed throughout history of ways to do this, but perhaps the most outlandish idea is to fire nuclear weapons into a hurricane. So, would this actually work? And what would actually happen if we ever decided to try it out? This idea has actually been around for quite some time. A meteorologist named Jack W. Reed suggested nuking hurricanes to destroy them as early as 1959. Reed noted that whenever a hydrogen bomb exploded, they would lift an enormous column of air up to 20 miles high into the sky afterwards. With this in mind, he speculated that a submarine armed with nuclear weapons could travel underwater through a hurricane and into the eye of the storm. Once inside of the eye, the submarine would launch multiple nuclear missiles that would detonate at the surface. The idea was that most of the warm air inside of the eye would be blasted out above the storm, while cold and more dense air would fill in and replace it, which would reduce the wind speed and therefore power of the hurricane. There were multiple problems with this theory, however, the first being that it wouldn't work. Hurricanes are ridiculously powerful events, and even average ones release 600 trillion joules of energy every single second. That's the equivalent to 10 Hiroshima-scale atomic bombs blowing up every second. In a single day, an average hurricane will release more energy than all of the electricity consumed by the United States in 2009. The most powerful nuclear device ever tested by humanity was the infamous Tsar Bomba at 50 megatons of explosive power, but that wouldn't even come close to matching the energy release of a hurricane. To match the energy release of a hurricane in a single day, you would have to detonate 238 Tsar Bombas inside of it, which would have the unfortunate side effect of destroying all of human civilization in the process. Even if you just detonated one, the radioactive fallout would be an additional severe problem that would get carried by the trade winds and cause horrible environmental damage, possibly costing more than the hurricane would have done anyway in the first place. The final obstacle to ever attempting this, though, is a legal one. The Peaceful Nuclear Explosions Treaty, signed by both the United States and the Soviet Union in 1990, limits the use of nuclear weapons for non-military purposes to just 150 kilotons. And considering how puny the 50 megaton Tsar Bomba is compared to a hurricane, this literally wouldn't do anything. The answer to the question of what would happen if we used a hurricane is probably nothing. Some scientists even theorize that it may cause the storm to grow even stronger, but it certainly wouldn't destroy it unless we were willing to destroy the whole world with it. Nobody ever took Reed up on this idea, thankfully, and with our technology today, the only things that we can really do to fight against hurricanes is to either run away or bunker down in shelter. As many of you probably know, I live in Texas, and the recent hurricane here in Houston has caused a truly biblical amount of destruction. Hurricane Harvey is estimated to have caused between $70 billion and $190 billion worth of damage, which could make it the costliest hurricane in American history. 30,000 people are still displaced from their homes here, and this isn't even to mention the humanitarian disaster that is currently unfolding in Puerto Rico in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria, and the incredible destruction in Florida as a result of Hurricane Irma. Added up together, this hurricane season will likely be the costliest in all of world history. But you can help entirely for free right now. It only takes 2 seconds to install the Tab for a Cause extension for your web browser. And when you install this extension, Tab for a Cause will donate to a charity of your choice every this doesn't cost you anything, which means that you can help assist with hurricane relief efforts or any other charitable mission right now while you are browsing the internet. Tabbers have already raised over $400,000 for charity through the extension, so you can follow this link on. This real-life lore video is made possible by Brilliant.org. Stay tuned for an exclusive Brilliant offer available only for real-life lore viewers at the end of this video. I'm sure that many of you growing up, like me, used to spend time dreaming about visiting another planet or another star. You've probably heard the phrase, born too late to explore the world and born too early to explore the universe, which implies that our ancestors explored the unknown parts of Earth, while our descendants will be exploring the unknown parts of our universe, leaving us in the 21st century as the awkward middle children with little exploration to accomplish. But is this really the case? And could our civilization actually reach out and touch another star during your lifetime? For reference, the nearest other known star closest to our sun is here called Proxima Centauri, but it's still 4.25 light years away from us. That doesn't seem too bad, so let's explore how to get there using current technology. I've talked about the Voyager 1 space probe in previous videos, so to summarize, this probe is the farthest away from Earth that a man-made object has ever been so far. It is currently almost 140 astronomical units away from our sun, meaning that it's 140 times farther away from the sun than Earth is. To have reached this distance, Voyager utilized gravity assists from both Jupiter and Saturn to reach a speed of 17 kilometers per second. But even at this faraway distance and at the same speed, it would take Voyager another 73,000 years to reach Proxima Centauri. NASA, however, is currently set to launch another space probe just next year in 2018 that will become the fastest moving object humanity has ever created. It's called the Parker Solar Probe, and it will be sent to study the outer corona of the Sun. Utilizing repeated gravity assists from Venus, the probe will enter into an elliptical orbit around the Sun, and at its closest point to the Sun in orbit, the probe will achieve a velocity of an amazing 200 kilometers per second. That's fast enough to zip around the entire Earth at the equator in 3 minutes and 24 seconds, but it's still only a tiny 0.07% of the speed of light, which means that even at that speed, it would take the probe well over 7,000 years to reach Proxima Centauri. So, is there any technology that we could reasonably see happening in our lifetime that would enable us to at least see another star system up close? Various ideas have been proposed throughout history, but perhaps the most credible one is a recent idea called Breakthrough Starshot. I briefly mentioned Breakthrough Starshot in my video from 2 weeks ago, but I didn't go into very much detail about how ambitious and revolutionary this project really is. If successful, Breakthrough Starshot will be one of the most important events of the entire 21st century. The plan calls to develop a tiny ship on the scale of centimeters weighing only a few grams with a sail attached to it, 4 meters across by 4 meters tall. It actually calls for 1,000 of these tiny ships and sails to be created and for all of them to be lifted into orbit by a larger mothership on a conventional rocket. Once in orbit, the mothership will deploy one tiny ship and sail at a time. The sail attached to the tiny ships will work much like a sail does on a boat on Earth, but instead of wind providing the necessary propulsion, it will be a huge 1 square kilometer ground-based array packed with high-powered lasers. This square kilometer of lasers will all concentrate their collective power onto the tiny sails of the ships one at a time, and this should be capable of propelling each vessel to 20% the speed of light in only 10 minutes. Once all 1,000 ships are on their way, they should be able to reach Proxima Centauri in about 20 years. And since the scheduled flight time is in the year 2036, that means that the first human-made spacecraft to arrive in another star system could take place in the near-ish future of 2056. That's not to say that the project is without any problems, however. A collision with even a speck of dust at that speed would destroy any of the craft, which is why 1,000 of them are going all at once, so at least some of them will make the journey. In addition, the square kilometer laser array on the ground will use a 100 gigawatts of power for each sail that it propels, which is roughly equivalent to the peak electricity consumption in France at 7 o'clock in the evening. Acquiring that much power is difficult, but still possible. Finally, the cost of the entire project is estimated to be at $10 billion, which sounds like a lot at first, but consider this. NASA's budget for 2018 is $19.1 billion, and the cost for the International Space Station has been $150 billion. The U.S. military budget, meanwhile, in 2015 was nearly $600 billion, and the U.S. federal budget for 2018 is well over $4 trillion. Taking $10 billion out of any of these enormous amounts of money is not very much to ask for, especially when you consider that there is a planet that orbits inside of the habitable zone of Proxima Centauri named Proxima Centauri b. The ships from Breakthrough Starshot will be capable of taking pictures of this mysterious planet that could reveal oceans, continents, and other surface features if they exist. If revealed to be truly habitable in this way, Proxima Centauri b will become the primary focus of future human colonization efforts in our galaxy. $10 billion is a very small price to pay for potentially securing the future of human civilization in our universe. And although all of us watching this video were likely born in the century before humans themselves will visit another star system, we can take pride in laying the foundations for our descendants to be the explorers that will carry our names and legacies with them. Any society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they shall never sit in. If you still have lingering questions regarding the math behind interstellar flight, how planets outside of the solar system are discovered, or how we know how big the universe is, then you should know that this video was directly based off the astronomy course offered at Brilliant.org. Brilliant is a truly wonderful online learning platform where you can learn about math and science in an easily approachable way by solving fun and challenging problems. For example, in their astronomy course, they have a section where they help you calculate the time it would take to accelerate a solar sail to 20% light speed, and how long it would take the sail to reach the Alpha Centauri system. It is the exact math that I used in the creation of this video. To learn much more about interstellar travel or any other interesting topics, head over to YouTube. So you may have seen my video from about a month ago where I announced that I wrote it. This real-life lore video is made possible by Skillshare, home to over 15,000 classes that can teach you a new life skill. The first 500 people to sign up using the link in the description will get a 2-month free trial. So commonly when we think of the most valuable material in the world, our minds tend to center onto gold. And while gold is very expensive at a current value of $56 per gram, there are other materials that are significantly more expensive. Drugs like heroin, cocaine, and LSD, for example, are the most expensive drugs in the world by sheer weight. Far more valuable than gold is. The market value for diamonds per gram is even more prohibitively expensive. But even this is nothing compared to the most valuable material currently known to humanity, antimatter. So, what even is antimatter? To put it simply, antimatter is the opposite of regular matter. Down at the atomic level, antimatter is made up of particles and atoms just like regular matter is. The only difference is that they have an opposite electric charge. Protons and antimatter are negative and called antiprotons, while electrons are positive and called positrons. Whenever antimatter and matter touch one another, they instantly annihilate each other in a 100%
star to Earth in just a little over 2 years. So why haven't we created enough antimatter yet to do any of these incredible things? The answer is because antimatter is incredibly rare, difficult to produce, and prohibitively expensive currently. It appears that nearly the entire observable universe is made out of regular matter, and while it is possible that there could be entire galaxies made out of antimatter, we have so far not been able to detect any. Antimatter is produced naturally in Earth's outer atmosphere when high-energy cosmic rays impact it, but the amount produced is tiny and lasts only briefly before it comes into contact with regular matter and annihilates itself. The only practical means of acquiring antimatter so far have been to produce it artificially ourselves, but even this method is incredibly difficult and expensive. The Large Hadron Collider, operated by CERN in Switzerland, for example, one of the most expensive and complicated facilities ever built, is capable of producing 10 million antiprotons per minute when fully operational. That sounds like a lot, but it's actually a laughably tiny amount. To produce just a single gram of antimatter at that rate of production, it would take CERN roughly 100 billion years to complete. Production is only the first problem, though. Storing it is perhaps an even larger problem. Since antimatter annihilates matter instantly, you can't just store it in a regular container. You have to suspend the material without it coming into contact with anything, and so far, CERN has only succeeded in storing antimatter atoms for a record 17 minutes before they became annihilated. Since just 1 gram is enough to obliterate an entire city, safety precautions in storing the material and keeping it in safe hands would be of the utmost importance, and we're not even sure how exactly we would store such a large amount in the first place. Estimates on how much antimatter costs to produce varies greatly. In an article written by NASA.org in 2006, a figure of $25 billion per gram is cited, while in another NASA paper written back in 1999, a figure of $62.5 trillion per gram is cited, which is about 83% of the entire global GDP just to produce 1 single gram. For reference, the Manhattan Project, which developed the first atomic bomb, cost $23 billion adjusted for inflation. And just like creating the atomic bomb did, creating antimatter in large quantities, if ever that's possible, would open up a new Pandora's box that we couldn't close once we opened it. We would have to live with the consequences of life in a world with abundant antimatter, both positive ones and negative ones. In the meantime, though, if you want to watch something positive and learn something new right now, then I suggest that you check out Skillshare.com, where you can watch thousands of different classes covering almost any subject that you can think of. I just recently finished writing my first book, and I'm already working on a fiction story, so I've been finding their classes on creative writing to be incredibly useful. You can teach yourself just about any skill online these days, and Skillshare is the perfect place to do it. Their classes are professional and easy to understand that follow a clear learning curve. You could even learn the skills to create your own business like I did with real-life lore through easy classes for animation and editing. Premium memberships usually begin at $10 per month for unlimited access to all of their courses, but the first 500 people to sign up using this link in the description will get a 2-month free trial. In those next 2 months, you can easily learn the skills that you need.
Transforme a sua criatividade em dinheiro extra com a Printful. Crie designs únicos dos nossos produtos e venda-nos.
This real-life lore video is made possible by Shaker and Spoon. Get $20 off your next order of fresh cocktails delivered straight to your door by clicking the link in the description. The Spanish Empire in its heyday used to be the most powerful empire that the world had ever seen. Over the centuries, however, her power began to gradually erode away. But the empire's lasting legacy, the Spanish language, has remained a strong force in the modern world. Spanish is the 4th most spoken language in the world, has more native speakers than English, and is one of the 6 official languages of the United Nations. Spanish is the majority 6,000 people, which is 6% of everybody in the world. However, that still only makes it the third largest country in the world in terms of population, since India and China both have significantly greater numbers of people. 10% of the empire's population would live in Europe, less than 1% would live in Africa, and the vast majority would live in the scattered territories of the Americas. Mexico City would be by far the largest city in this new empire, followed by Buenos Aires, Bogota, Lima, and Santiago. Out of the top 10 largest cities, only 2, Madrid and Barcelona, would be located inside of Spain. Mexico alone would account for over 1 out of every 4 people in the empire. And speaking of the population of this empire, the people that make it up would be an incredibly ethnically diverse group. Mestizos, meaning people of mixed European and Amerindian heritage, make up the majority of this population at 60%, while people that identify as exclusively white make up 18% of the population, and people that identify as exclusively Amerindian or indigenous make up a further 14%. People who identify as black make up 3%, and the remaining 5% is a mixed group of various other ethnicities. The empire would also be overwhelmingly Catholic, with 72% of the population adhering to this faith. 1 out of every 4 Catholics in the entire world would call the new Spanish Empire home, while a further 13% of the empire's population would be Protestant, and 10% would be irreligious, agnostic, or atheist. Of course, Spanish would be by far the most spoken language in the empire. 94% of the population would claim Spanish as their mother tongue, while hundreds of various indigenous languages of the Americas would be spoken by a further 5% of the population. Economically speaking, the empire would have a GDP of $4.63 trillion US, making it the 4th largest economy in the world behind Japan, China, and the United States. The Spanish Empire would also control the largest oil reserves in the world in modern-day Venezuela, so while gold and silver was the main commodity plundered in the New World by Spain in the 16th and 17th centuries, oil would likely be the main commodity of the 21st century. The Spanish Empire would also have one of the largest militaries in the world, with 1,593,000 active duty troops and another 1,878,000 troops placed into reserves. Combining the two, the empire would have the 6th largest military in the world, with more soldiers than either the United States or China. The budget that would fund this military, though, would be a bit lacking at only $51.9 billion US, the 7th largest budget in the world ahead of the United Kingdom, but remaining behind France, India, and Saudi Arabia. The capital of this new Spanish Empire might be Madrid for historical reasons, but much more likely would actually be Mexico City, owing to the fact that it would be the largest city in the empire, is already the capital city of Mexico, and is the largest city in the entire Western Hemisphere, which is where the majority of the Spanish Empire's territory and population would be located. There would be several beautiful vacation destinations across the new country in both the Americas and Europe. But if you want a small slice of a vacation to any of these destinations without leaving your house, then you should check out Shaker and Spoon next. If you're as busy as I am, you probably don't have enough time to plan and shop for drinks or cocktails, but you can get fresh cocktails delivered straight to your doorstep with Shaker and Spoon. Shaker and Spoon will send a box to your home with the exact ingredients that you need, with 3 brand new original recipes created by world-class bartenders. There's enough in each box to create 12 cocktails, perfect for whenever you come home late and want to mix something easy yourself, or for when you want to mix several at once for your friends, who will be totally impressed by your bartending skills, as each cocktail comes with an easy-to-follow recipe. All you need to add is the liquor, and what's better, cheers. This real-life work video is made possible by Casper. Get $50 to work any mattress purchase. This